So the story kicks off with a Japanese office worker living the grind every single day, stuck under the weight of relentless work. The boredom of his life screamed in silence, 2 straight years at the same business, handing his boss every second until the calendar was almost about to flip to a new day. As he trudged home in the dead of night, exhaustion hit him in waves, and a brutal throbbing headache kept hammering his skull. A physical sign of how drained he was, then he glanced at his watch and bam, that first night he met his little friend came rushing back. The monotony of his whole day shattered the second he came home, one simple click of the door unlocking, and suddenly a flood of joyful noise erupted. A tiny dog scratching excitedly and darting around like pure energy. That tiny, fluffy bundle of pure cuteness practically buzzed with life, and everyone agreed on the name, Leo. Man, there on the floor, petting his beloved buddy, burst into that hilarious memory. How he picked the name Leo, a bold masculine choice after picturing strong, athletic male dogs, only to find out his loyal little friend was actually a girl. A strange dread slammed into the man, then he realized the earthquake wasn't outside at all. It was him trembling hard, which sent him into a sudden, brutal tumble when he jolted awake, and the world was wildly different. An open sky overhead, a wall of thick trees all around him, and the first thing that hit his ears was his dogs barking like they'd somehow found him. He snapped his head up in shock, staring at a massive wolf-like beast towering over him. A massive, jaw-dropping giant loomed over him, and its enormous face suddenly snapped into his view. The man was totally rattled, blurting to himself that wolves that huge just don't exist, and before he could even blink, dread snapped into him because he fully expected a fatal attack. Instead of chomping him, the giant creature snaked out a huge tongue and blasted him with a sloppy, affectionate lick. That massive, wolf-sized presence with those innocent, familiar eyes hit him all at once. This giant wolf wasn't some stranger at all, it was Leo. Somehow, that little dog completely transformed his life, and the man couldn't believe how Leo had skyrocketed in size. Gawking at how unbelievably brave that dog looked now. He couldn't shake the feeling, what if this whole thing was just a dream? With the change this massive, he could only settle on one sensible thought, and then he shot for the idea of riding her. The massive beast actually seemed to get it, and it even welcomed the suggestion with open approval. That instant panic of someone lost in a brand new place suddenly turned into the only thing that mattered. Hemmed in by a giant, never-ending forest, the man clawed at his panic, thirst hit hard, and he realized his survival skills wouldn't save him here. Leo tested her new power right away, sprinting him to a stream where he could finally drink. Man blurted out his heartfelt thanks, staring in awe at his friend, who had suddenly ballooned into something giant. He finally grabbed the break he desperately needed. He swallowed his pride and apologized to Leo for ghosting her, because his past life was buried in work and he let it push her aside. He took in the calm beauty of his new surroundings, and the moment hit him, he couldn't even remember the last time he'd felt this completely, deeply at peace. Leo's quick break got shattered when something far off snapped his attention. Then the man spotted a vile, two-legged, pig-like creature. He instantly clocked that monster for an orc. A creature no one had ever seen outside video games showed up. Then Leo lunged and attacked in a flash, showing jaw-dropping explosive strength that smashed the monster instantly, while the man stood there, utterly stunned by the impossible moment. Found a spark of dark humor as he sliced up a piece of the dead orc for his meal. He stumbled on this meal by surprise, and it absolutely blew him away with how good it tasted. He chased the river, desperate to spot the exit before the endless forest swallowed him whole. Leo's bright, carefree mood practically screamed that he was certain they were headed the right way. Their journey got wrecked by a scream for help in the distance, and this kind-hearted man snapped into action, sprinting toward it, praying whoever was trapped also had a map to lead them to safety. They burst in to find a young woman getting threatened all over again, this time by an even bigger, meaner orc. Leo burst onto the scene and the monster's world flipped, pure fear hit it hard. He lunged ahead to make sure the woman was safe. The woman, dressed like royalty, clasped the man's hands and thanked him again and again for saving her life. The moment the man laid eyes on her, he decided she was stunning. Then she walked up, dubbed Leo a silver Fenrir, and asked if the monster was his partner. A single word hit him like a punch, so weird it left him totally stunned and forced him to improvise an excuse on the spot. The man took up the silver Fenrir as its master, shrugging off the disbelief and committing himself to this new reality. That only fueled his gut feeling. He'd been tossed into some fantasy world like a video game. That woman's knowledge felt endless as she revealed the Silver Fenrir, an all-out legend. She said those monsters are the absolute toughest kind, built to crush anything and totally unwilling to ever serve humans. They move faster than the wind itself, slinging power like it's nothing, fireballs out of their mouths, claws that shred anything in seconds, and fangs that snap through anything they bite. They're FURT. That's how everyone knows how terrifying their power is, and the creature itself becomes the exact symbol stamped on the royal badge. Even with this wild description staring everyone in the face, the man just grinned and claimed the legendary creature was nothing more than Leo, his friend. He tried to play it humble, acting like he was just some regular guy, nothing special, no big background, but the woman's eyes widened and she snapped that only an ordinary person wouldn't be able to become friends with a Silver Fenrir. She was absolutely sure he was some legendary figure. Then he calmly stuck to his simple truth and introduced himself as Haruka Takumi. Then she stepped forward and introduced herself, Clare Lieber, letting the name land and pouring out her deepest thanks for saving him again. Leo's massive white wolf stood there, calm as a statue beside Haruka Takumi, while Clare Lieber, still shaken from that brutal orc encounter, kept thanking them, her voice cracking with formal relief. Claire leaned in and demanded he stop with all the stiff formalities, calling her Claire already and dropping the titles himself too. With a weird, dreamlike chill in his gut, the man nodded and accepted this world's new name, Takumi. With the danger finally fading, Takumi leaned in and grilled Claire about how she dared to go into the woods alone. Claire shrugged and told him she wasn't lost at all, she was hunting for plants she could use to make medicine. When the orcs suddenly burst in, her horse bolted like a cannon shot, ripping her away from safety and leaving her stranded and terrified in the wild. Then the man finally listened and realized this wasn't some game gimmick, the danger was real. Claire fired back the same question, desperate to know why he and that massive friend had marched straight into the deep forest. Still, he had nothing believable to offer about why he'd been pulled into this strange new world. Takumi gave a plain, shaky answer. He'd just woken up in this forest with zero clue why. He kept marching through it ever since. Even though his claim sounded totally off the wall, Claire, so locked in on his Silver Fenrir, just took his word without pressing him. Then she leaned in close and asked Takumi, "Can you spare me a moment? I need to ask you a favor." And with everything already clear about Leo, Takumi didn't even hesitate, he jumped at the chance to help. Claire's face lit up with a grateful grin, and she thanked them again and again. That easy favor turned out to be tough. Claire needed help hunting down the medicinal plants, and then she dropped a crucial clue about exactly where the plant grows. Sworn rumors said it would creep right up to the river in this very forest. But no matter how hard she searched, it was nowhere to be found. So Takumi watched Leo sniff the ground and tried to pull his basic plant knowledge from the back of his mind, guessing it was a mugwort-type plant from Claire's description, until the truth hit fast and the real name was revealed, shutting his guess down immediately. They kept pushing their search along the river, and the job suddenly felt safer with that massive Silver Fenrir pacing right beside them, until the minutes dragged on and still nothing turned up. Tiredness finally hit them hard, so the whole group grabbed a quick breather. Right during that rest, something totally unexplainable happened. An entire patch of medicinal herb burst up from the ground out of nowhere, right in front of Takumi. Stunned like something magical just happened, he blurted out if that plant had somehow popped up out of nowhere. Then shoved the thought aside and in pure excitement yelled to Claire that he'd found them, and Claire was instantly over the moon. He confirmed it really was Capworth, then thanked Takumi again with a huge grin, making it clear the whole discovery happened only because of him. Even though the mysterious spectacle left him stunned, he just shrugged it off and said he was only happy he could help, and that there was absolutely no trouble at all. Once the medicinal herbs were safely packed, the real problem hit. How were they even getting out of there? Claire's horse was gone and the forest just kept stretching on forever. Leo felt the trouble coming and started barking, tailing it with an eager, waiting stare, and Takumi got it instantly, turning to the giant wolf like, "So, do you want us to ride on you?" The Silver Fenrir nodded in agreement and Claire bows her head, calls out Ms. Leo, cheered as the massive creature graciously accepted the incredible offer. Takumi and Claire clambered onto the massive Silver Fenrir, and the moment they settled on her back, the giant wolf exploded forward, leaping into a sprint and surging faster by the second. The rush hit hard, like something impossible was actually happening in front of them. As the speed swallowed every word, Takumi had to bellow just to be heard, and then she snapped, "Leo, do you even know where we're going?" They stepped in, snapped out clear directions, turn right first, and then just like that, a road would show up right after. Follow the road. Once they hit it, the thick woods fell away behind them, and it opened into wide, endless plains stretching as far as his eyes could reach. Takumi's whole world looked completely alien compared to the life he'd grown up in. Climbing atop that legendary monster with a beautiful young woman riding beside him, Takumi finally had the proof he couldn't ignore. When he stared out at the endless country landscape that looked nothing like his world, he knew this wasn't a dream anymore, it was the real doorway to another world. Their fast travel barely finished when they popped out in front of a massive, jaw-dropping gate. Claire told Leo to halt, and that giant wolf obeyed instantly. The moment a young woman rode up to the gates of that massive estate on a silver Fenrir, the armored guards snapped to attention until Claire barked, "Stand down, it's me," cutting off their panic before they could even react to the legendary monster. She straightened up and told the baffled soldiers, loud and clear, the silver Fenrir wasn't some enemy to fear, it was a honored guest and they'd show it real respect. Claire dropped down to stand, spun toward Takumi and beckoned him inside. Still reeling from the day's chaos, the man stared past the iron gates and up at the building. Then it hit him. Claire's status wasn't important, it was mansion level. Leo's massive silver Fenrir stood outside the Liber estate's towering old stone walls, waiting with unnerving patience, while Sebastian, the family butler, dignified yet clearly anxious, hurried out at once to greet his lady. He practically exhaled in relief when he saw Claire safe, because if anything had happened to her, he honestly wouldn't have known what to do. Then Claire hurriedly apologized for putting him through all that stress and right away asked about her sister, Talora. Sebastian's report hit like a punch. Talora was still trapped in bed and her fever was dangerously high. Claire didn't waste a second, she shoved the medicinal herbs into the mix because every single one mattered for keeping her sister alive. Claire then spilled every terrifying detail of her rescue, how an orc pinned her down and she truly thought death was coming, until Takumi slammed in and pulled her out before it was too late. Sebastian introduced himself with a deep bow and flooded the newcomer with gratitude, insisting no words could ever cover his thanks, until Takumi brushed it off like it was nothing and nudged Sebastian to thank Leo instead. The legendary beast being Takumi's partner shattered Sebastian's calm in an instant, and shock flashed across his face before he could even hide it. Sebastian's voice rang out, confirming the creature was a silver Fenrir, and that its power was absolutely massive. After watching Leo's claws slice clean through the orc, he snapped into explanation about just why that creature mattered so much. Silver Fenrir were labeled unbeatable, so much so that their very presence became the heart of the kingdom, and for him, the thought that someone could tame one and bind it as a partner felt flat-out impossible. Takumi, desperate to guard the friendship he shared with Leo, gently checked the butler and admitted straight up that calling their bond taming was a stretch, then insisted he'd rather call her his partner, not his familiar. The man finally confessed he'd taken her in years ago only for that one truth to crank the mystery up even higher. Claire cut into the conversation, totally baffled, because how on earth would anyone just grab a young silver Fenrir when those fierce parents were almost certainly right there watching? Takumi slid back into his prepared, half-true tale, spinning Leo's origin as some innocent Maltese puppy abandoned by the roadside, curled up in a cardboard box. The story sounded so impossible that Claire just stared at him, caught between awe and suspicion, silently screaming, "Who are you, and why would you make me believe this?" Luckily for Takumi, Claire snapped her questions to a stop and blurted that Talora's health comes first, talk can wait for later. She told Sebastian to greet their guest, because he didn't just save her life, he also tracked down the capwort plant they needed. Sebastian marched the man straight into the royal home, the jaw-dropping Libra estate mansion. Servants finally lined up and formally welcomed him, Takumi, who'd only ever known the plain, cozy comfort of an apartment. Claire was completely overwhelmed by the massive entrance and that majestic hallway where servants and maids lined up, ready to greet her. They poured out heartfelt gratitude to Takumi and Leo for dragging their lady out of a terrifying nightmare. Layla and Gelda, two maids with sharp smiles, stepped forward, introduced themselves, and before anyone could blink, they were already moving fast. He was put in charge of making sure Takumi and Leo were watched over properly. Takumi finally understood Claire's selfless motive. She risked everything by sprinting into the dangerous forest to find a cure for her sick sister, and Takumi was blown away by how kind she truly was. He blurted out his one big worry, then Layla immediately stepped in and soothed him to calm. He swore hosting Leo was a breeze, insisting there was more than enough room for his mighty friend. They marched into a lavish sitting room where elegant furniture surrounded them like royalty, and it felt like pure, mind-blowing wealth. Takumi, still trapped in that deep Japanese instinct to never cause trouble, had slipped back into the fancy scene, and the whole luxurious place started making him feel painfully out of place. He dropped into a seat, scratching the silver Fenrir's gigantic head as it sprawled peacefully at his feet, and then it slammed him again. His tiny little dog was absolutely enormous. Monster showed up as a lucky guest in a glittering mansion, because this whole wild fantasy story event had set the stage for him. Layla and Gelda stormed back in with drinks, balancing a tray that glinted with a fragile teapot and a neat row of cups. Leo flashed incredible manners and, with the gentlest touch, reached out to take the teacup off the tray with her mouth. But Gilda couldn't handle all that monstrous politeness. She screamed and sent the saucer crashing to the ground. Takumi sprinted up to apologize to Leo, calming the terrified maid and telling her he got why she was scared. Because, yeah, Leo does look intimidating. Then he insisted his partner was adorable and definitely wouldn't bite, but Layla snapped back hard, chewing out Gelda for being rude to a guest. Watching Leo's soft, careful moves, they defended the silver Fenrir, then pointed out the truth. For someone built that big, she managed to take the tea without a single loud sound, like she was trying her hardest not to spook her. Takumi's teasing remark calling Gelda cute, plus Leo's steady words finally helped Gelda settle down. Clare rushed back in no time, delivering the capword straight to her sister as she came. Takumi shot straight to Talora's condition, and Clara nodded that the medicine was already at work. Then she thanked him again, like seriously, for everything he'd done. Claire finally fired the question at Takumi, where he'd come from. She flat out said she was completely baffled. How could Takumi not know about Silver Fenrir when he had one as his partner, and why did he seem clueless about monsters at all? She admitted she owed him more than just her life, and that's when the real question got pushed forward, driven by pure curiosity and a need to understand. Takumi almost tried to dodge it with a flimsy excuse, but Claire noticed his unease, softened her tone, and promised she wouldn't press him if he felt uncomfortable. Still, then she finally tipped her hand with full trust. She'd clocked his weird clothes, sure, but once he opened his strange story, she swore that no matter how wild it got, she'd still believe him. Her reason was simple. She'd seen how Ms. Leo trailed after him, completely devoted, right there with that heart-deep look of trust, like she was ready to. Yumi finally cranked up the courage to tell the truth, and he trusted her to the fullest, promising he'd tell her everything. And that they'd start all over again from the moment he woke up in the forest. Now that the truth about his past finally hit the table, Takumi slowly started spilling the wild story of how he got accidentally dragged into another world. He talked about Leo, his tiny puppy back in his old world, the little pet he rescued from an abandoned cardboard box. Takumi told them the shock hit the second they arrived. Her body instantly snapped into a whole new size and build, like she'd been granted a special power in this world, turning her into the legendary Silver Fenrir. Claire, eyes sharp and thoughts racing, admitted she'd never heard of an animal turning into a Silver Fenrir, but the man's straight-up honesty hooked her and she couldn't stop listening. That's when Takumi introduced the term isekai for his story. He broke it down using the wild stories from his own world, where people get snatched away to other realms out of nowhere, and he hammered home the terrifying gap between realities, reminding everyone that creatures like orcs were just fantasy trapped in his memory. Sebastian stormed up to Claire, panic flashing in his eyes, and demanded answers about how wild the guest's story sounded. Claire slammed the doubts shut, saying Takumi had earned her trust with every action and every honest word, so yeah, she was finally ready to believe him. Claire's faith steadied Takumi, and he gratefully accepted her offer to stay at the Liber estate, because with no other choice left, he had to take it. Claire snapped her orders to Sebastian, and the maids right away get a room ready for Takumi, no delays because his well-being came first. To show them mad respect, Claire practically buzzed with excitement and mapped out a huge welcome party for the two of them. When they asked Leo what his favorite food was, Takumi shot back, "Do they have sausages in this world?" And Leo erupted with an excited, gigantic ruff. Then the vibe snapped into something weird. During the herb hunt, Takumi spotted the capwort he'd found, fresh and ready, and the second he tried to bring it back to the table, it had turned dried as if time itself got slammed. He couldn't wrap his head around what could make it change that fast. Claire steered the conversation toward something far more urgent. She demanded they check if that herb was still usable. After Sebastian swore Talora would be okay soon, they snapped back to the terrifying mystery of that dried plant. Sebastian and the maids lay out the town's belief in gifts, blessings straight from God. The butler leaned in and dropped the truth. These gifts are so rare they only find their way to 1 out of every million newborns. He explained that gift holders usually shine in specific ways, like smithing lets you forge swords that slice through anything, while magic gifts you with raw power that hits even harder. Sebastian made it crystal clear, these gift holders were only ever known from old records in this kingdom, so when Takumi showed up it felt downright impossible. Clarence Sebastian insisted that the capwort drying on its own wasn't some ordinary miracle. He pointed out that a spell made specifically to dry plants was basically unheard of. And he decided Takumi had to be hiding the gift all along, because the moment he showed up it appeared like it was waiting for him. Sebastian suggested they use a magic device to pin down what this bizarre power really is, but they shoved the plan aside with smiles and dove into dinner. Then, after they were done eating, they headed back to the living room where their talk finally snapped into magic. Takumi leaned in and told his hosts the brutal truth. In his world, magic simply doesn't exist. And it only ever showed up in made-up tales, so Sebastian, thrilled to lay out the truth of his world, grabbed the floor and started telling. Taught Takumi that magic is nothing mystical at all, it's just the mana inside you, the life force every living being carries, the thing you can't live without. To use magic, you've got to shout a chant, because those words decide exactly what the spell does and how strong it hits. He broke it down for me. There are 4 elemental magic types: fire, water, wind, and earth. Sebastian then flicked out a basic fire elemental spell, and Takumi couldn't hide his amazement. Takumi slammed a blunt truth. All that chanting time, especially for the big, powerful spells, would never fit while a monster was actively charging at them. Sebastian stunned everyone by revealing advanced techniques, like the terrifying power of voiceless chants. Right in the middle of their academic debate, a sharp knock hit the door, and Claire's younger sister slammed into the room like pure chaos. Talora, healed thanks to the dried capwort, rushed to thank the guest who'd saved her sister and made sure her medicine finally reached her. Just as Claire's group got serious about magic, Talora, Claire's little sister, burst through the door like a spark, all energy, and shouted that she'd never felt better. Claire could hardly believe her eyes as she demanded whether the medicine had worked that fast, already fixing her sister. Talora stepped up and introduced herself to Takumi as Talora Liber, then threw her gratitude at him, thanking him for saving Claire and for tracking down that life-saving medicinal herb. Takumi stepped in and, flashing a quick grin, told her, "I'm Haruka Takumi, but forget the formalities, just call me Takumi." Claire felt the tension finally loosen, but she still pushed her sister back into bed, swearing it was way too soon, she'd only just recovered. Talora slumped her shoulders and muttered sorry because being stuck in her room for so long had her crawling out of her skin, and then the moment she saw the magnificent white wolf, her eyes went wide. "Wait, do we have a dog now?" she asked, absolutely stunned. Claire snapped back, laughing softly, "Not a dog, this is a silver Fenrir, a powerful one." Takumi stepped forward, snapped the truth into place, "It's Leo," and then made it crystal clear how close they were by calling her his partner. Talora's face lit up. She begged her sister for permission to touch the Fenrir, and when she pointed out that Leo loves playing with kids, her sister gave her the green light. Talora sprinted up to Leo with pure joy, running her hands over his massive head like he was begging for it. Sebastian burst in, snagged Talora from the happy moment, and hauled her back to her room to get some rest. Right before she left, Talora spun around, radiant with joy, and thanked Takumi and Ms. Leo for gifting her sister a moment of pure happiness. Then, with the day's chaos finally fading, Takumi slipped into the lavish guest room Layla had set up for him. Sprawled in that lavish bed, while Leo slept sound as the night beside him. The guy's mind snapped inward like, what if this is all just a dream? But the seconds kept stretching way too long and he still hadn't woken up, which hit him with one undeniable truth. He wasn't dreaming, he was in a whole other world. Next morning, Takumi didn't wake to a buzzing alarm. Leo's gentle barking nudged him awake. He jolted when he spotted Clare already in his room, grinning and telling him good morning. Flustered, he admitted he wasn't built for mornings, then muttered a quick joke to Leo for not waking him up earlier. Claire showed up to drag him along for breakfast in the dining room, but right before they could leave, Talora burst in, still buzzing with energy, ready to play with Leo, while Takumi just stood there, completely melted by the girl's non-stop, bubbly affection for his partner. Talora cut in and told Takumi to drop the formalities, because if he was truly an amazing person, the master of the legendary Fenrir, then she figured respect should start with her. Takumi's face burned with embarrassment as he got ready to head out for breakfast. Then a brand new dread hit him the second he started moving. The man instinctively rubbed his face and realized, oh no, I need a shave. Then the irony hit him hard. In this wild fantasy world, he didn't even have a tea razor, and to make it worse, he had zero spare clothes either. He knew he had to sit down with Sebastian and spill everything about his mess. At the dining table, drenched in a lavish feast, Takumi quietly snapped his fingers to snag the butler's attention. He swallowed his embarrassment, apologized for the inconvenience, and leaned toward Sebastian, asking could he borrow a change of clothes and shave that beard. Sebastian snapped to attention, apologized on the spot for missing Takumi's needs, and swore he'd get those items to him in no time. Talora finished her meal and turned to Clare, asking if she could take Leo out to the garden to play. Clare nodded and told Takumi, can you watch Leo for a sec? Takumi slipped away with a quick apology, promising he'd catch up with them the moment he was done with his personal business. Layla burst into Takumi's room with fresh clothes and everything he needed to shave, and when she handed him a simple knife for his facial hair, his eyes went wide with stunned disbelief. Sure enough, his hunch was right. Now he just had to wonder if he was actually meant to use a knife. With gritted teeth, he painfully scraped away his prickly stubble, each swipe sending a maddening, itchy sting that made him squirm. Bursting out of his room fresh and clean-shaven, dressed in killer new clothes, Takumi was met by Clare and Talora, who practically cheered as they shouted that he looked like a whole new person. Talora practically bounced ahead, sprinting to hook up with Leo, grinning as her excited sidekick played along with the girl who was finally on the mend. Takumi couldn't help but feel satisfied. Then Sebastian slid in, practically bursting with relief after seeing Talora up and moving with all that energy. Claire leaned in and gently teased the butler for spiraling into worry, murmuring that she'd remember, next time, how not to set his nerves off again. Takumi laughed it off, insisting Claire's sweet concern was just another piece of her charm. Stunned and secretly thrilled, she froze for a second, totally caught off guard by that unexpected compliment. The very next morning, right after Takumi's real origins blew the lid off everything, the party rolled out of Libera State, racing toward the nearby town of Rattos. A brand new horse hauled their grand carriage, packed with Clare, her sister Talora, who practically begged to come along even if she had to stay strapped inside the coach, and the butler Sebastian. Takumi was coming too. Freshly clean-shaven and dressed in a neat, perfectly fitting new outfit, he sat in the carriage, grateful yet quietly on edge. Clare insisted the trip had one job only: grab the essentials for Takumi, especially the right clothes. When Takumi questioned the price, Clare shot his worries down on the spot and told him, straight up, that he didn't have to stress about a single coin. As the carriage jolted along and that non-stop GRTK blared in the background, Takumi's thoughts snapped back to the strange gift he somehow had. He cringed, apologized for pestering her again and again, then leaned in and demanded, would they finally figure out what his unknown Rakdos ability really was? Claire nodded and told him they'd track down his clothes first, then they'd start the examination. Takumi just sat there, thinking hard about what kind of gift this could be. Claire pushes the truth out of the shadows. Some gifted people ignite their power from birth, but others, especially kids from families without any gift holders, might not awaken their abilities until much later in life. We both believed one thing with our whole hearts: the real power isn't the gift itself, it's the choice of how you decide to use it. Right before they reached the main gate, the carriage driver slammed on the brakes, parked, and told Takumi to hang tight while he stayed there, waiting with patience. The moment Takumi stepped into Rattos, the roaring noise and packed streets hit him like a wall. He blurted out that this town was insanely busy and overflowing with people. Claire laid out why that settlement mattered so much. Rattos was the only safe bridge through the savage, deadly lands beyond. She explained that the forest where Takumi woke up sprawled across the south and west, with mountains sitting to the north, and warned him both places were crawling with monsters. The very first stop hit like a thunderclap. the biggest market in the whole town. A spot where the Libert family always went to grab their ingredients and stack up on food. The moment that mouthwatering smell hit the air, Leo's head snapped toward it, while the massive silver Fenrir practically trembled out of sheer joy, nearly yanking Takumi toward the sausage stand with her unstoppable excitement. Claire smirked like she knew everything. She said Leo loved sausages so hard she had to brace herself for a full-on sprint the second she spotted them. Sebastian showed up to escort them and snapped their focus to the first thing on the agenda, Mr. Takumi's clothes, so they should rush to the tailor. Inside the tailor's shop, Claire burst in and demanded custom clothes for Takumi, while Takumi instantly cringed, painfully aware of every coin they'd be spending. Heat rushed to his face, and he blurted that he was totally fine with wearing store-bought clothes. Claire practically froze in pure disbelief. She blurted, "Wait, you mean there's such a thing as ready-made clothes?" She finally admitted that in her whole life she'd only ever worn tailor-made clothes. Then Harton, the tailor, jumped in and told her the real truth. Most people go with mass-produced outfits because they fit well enough. Takumi dug his heels in, refusing the ready-made clothes and insisting that taking that pricey bespoke set would make him feel like he owed the family a mountain of debt. The party, now flanked by 2 armored guards, marched out of the shop. 6 ruffians swooped in and stopped them cold, clocking Claire's expensive clothes at a glance. Thinking Takumi was totally unarmed and helpless, the gang leader snapped that they were broke and swung straight into a plan to rob them. Right before the soldiers could move, Leo shoved himself in. Then the silver Fenrir snapped its blazing glare and sent the first group scrambling in terror. One robber tried to look fearless, but he charged in like an idiot, only for Leo to blast him with something from his spit, wham, sending him stumbling back with a guttural TWEE. And the legendary beast's brutal power instantly shattered the whole gang's nerve, leaving them frozen, stunned, and crumpled on the ground. Takumi softly patted Leo's head and gave her a gentle scold. "Hey, remember what I told you about eating stuff that isn't food?" Takumi leaned in and asked Claire if these ruffians were a daily nightmare in Rattos. Claire answered by confirming that bandits regularly ambush merchants and travelers. But she had to admit, she really thought the guards would be way more on their toes. Down guard finally stumbled in, breathless with an apology for the delay, and Claire immediately ordered them to cuff the defeated robbers. Claire immediately apologized to Takumi for using Leo, insisting she never meant to intimidate them with Ms. Leo, just to try to handle things. Takumi stayed calm, then calmly reminded her. Leo was the one who lunged into the fight on her own. Right as the group was about to dive back into shopping, a young woman pushed through the crowd and stepped up to Takumi, then asked, "Excuse me, could I steal just a little bit of your time?" Right then, right as the town visit's final events were about to kick off, an unexpected interruption hit, because a young woman, emboldened by the silver Fenrir's gentle presence, marched right up to Takumi. The crowd that poured in after Leo wiped out the ruffians in a flash didn't leave any room for doubt. They proved Lady Clare really was the elegant woman, and they also made it clear that the stunning white beast standing there was no illusion at all. Real silver Fenrir. Nora, yeah, asterisk that Nora blew everyone away when she admitted she'd seen the wolf before, watching her effortlessly snap a sword in half with nothing but her fangs, and then, Takumi. Seeing how they talked about him, Takumi stepped in and corrected them sharply but softly, telling everyone Leo wasn't a familiar, he was his partner. Then, as the crowd swelled and stared in awe at the legendary beast, Takumi leaned in and reassured them, saying Leo was kind at his core. He snapped out the simple order, "Leo, down," and the massive Fenrir instantly obeyed, dropping right at his feet like it had been waiting for the cue. Claire seized the opening, calling out that Leo could stroll through this town without a single problem was proof of just how calm she truly was. Nora, rattled by fear, apologized anyway. Then, once courage kicked in, she reached out and petted the legendary beast. When her fingers brushed the silver Fenrir's fur and it turned out unbelievably soft, she couldn't help but gasp. Amy graciously accepted her apology, waving it off with, "It's okay, water under the bridge," and that simple moment shattered the townspeople's fear like a dam finally giving way. Triggered a full-on petting frenzy, with locals swarming in, desperate for their shot to touch the mythical creature. The whole shopping trip suddenly hit a wall and froze for almost 2 hours, until the crowd finally vanished and everything started moving again. Once the town square finally emptied, Claire dragged Takumi to the next stop and landed them in the best general store in Rattos. Takumi stared at the store's massive size and his jaw dropped. It felt so huge it had to be the biggest in this whole town. They stepped inside and ran straight into the owner, Hein, and the place blew their minds with everything from food and accessories to weapons. Takumi spotted it hidden among random odds and ends, a set of pocket watches staring right back at him, the final clue that proved he didn't belong in this world. He instantly clocked it. Those clocks had no minute or second hands at all. Then Claire dropped the truth. In this new world's physics, the whole idea of seconds and minutes simply doesn't exist. Also, their clocks don't just tick normally. The hour hand climbs to 14 and makes 2 full trips, so one day here stretches to 28 hours. Takumi instantly clocked the reason. Maybe time is tracked differently out here, or maybe the planet itself turns so slowly that everything drags. He went straight to Heilng, grabbed a pocket watch and a table clock and set out to crack the mystery behind that bizarre difference. As the shopping wrapped up, Takumi finally snapped. He wanted to give back to the family that'd been so kind to him, so he pointed out the accessories he'd been dying to buy as gifts. Sebastian eavesdropped on the plan, burst in, and exposed the truth. Turns out the original scheme was to buy his items using the reward money Takumi earned after saving Lady Clare. Even though Takumi was thankful for the offer, pride clenched his chest. He accepted the goods but swore he'd pay it back someday. At last they stormed out of the store and Takumi clocked how long they'd been stuck in Rattos. Turns out Leo had been stealing the spotlight with everyone in town. Then it hit him, this trip had a second mission, and he needed to analyze his gift. Claire swallowed the mistake, then glanced at the clock. Late as it was, she insisted it was still just enough time to visit the place and uncover what his mysterious power really was. The whole ride to where Takumi, the young man, would finally get his mana analyzed felt like forever until the group rolled up to a grim gray building. Black plaque, white pentagram, the works, and one of the companions immediately confessed the scary design was giving them the creeps. When he pushed in, the door snapped shut with this brutal crush-ock noise like a punch to the ears, right before the rest cut off. Some analyst, at least that's what he seemed to be, stepped up and hit them with a plain, quick hello. Right after that, he got blasted for being late. An old lady scolded him with a hard stare, saying he acted like he had all day and that he'd better know not to make an old woman wait. One of Takumi's companions, male, calm, and clearly trying not to start trouble, stepped up, apologized politely to Isabel and said they'd been delayed by some incident. Isabel, the so-called mana analyst, stepped up with a smile, greeted him with a bright "good evening," and then welcomed them in right after his first greeting. Then she zeroed in on Takumi, the whole reason they'd come, and she nailed it. He was the young guy hunting a mana analysis. Telling him this exam wasn't just a test, it was built to uncover what his gift really could do. She told the young man to place his hand on the crystal ball and urged him to stop hesitating. Takumi lowered his hand over the crystal, and the crystal ball sat gleaming inside that bowl-shaped basin. Tiny bursts of glowing light started popping out of the crystal ball and into his hand. Sparks snapped and flickered across the scene as the sound effects screamed it loud, and you could tell something had just triggered. With a grin, Isabel confirmed mana was there, then the analysis kicked off. She watched the whole spectacle unfold after. After a beat, she grinned and said there's no doubt this young man has plenty of talent. Then she laid out her first prediction and told him straight up, if he trains hard, he'll become a real master of magic. Then the old woman locked eyes with Takumi and dropped a jaw-clenching line like, "Tell me, isn't it obvious you're a gift holder?" That question seals the mana analysis results. Then Isabel steps in, looks Takumi dead in the eyes and officially names his power, herb cultivation. She tells him it's his special gift, and then she quickly breaks down what it does, because yeah, as the name screams, he can grow weeds and herbs. And that's when one of Takumi's companions, a young lady, leaned in and demanded the full story on how his gift actually worked. Then another character spelled it out: he could grow almost any plant you can think of as long as it wasn't a crop. Isabel snapped in a sharp warning, this power only works if the herb he's trying to grow is planted in its natural habitat. Then another male companion, maybe Claire's father or guardian, stepped in and pointed to an old incident to prove just how deadly that gift really is, asking Takumi's female partner, likely Clare, whether she thinks Takumi's power played a role in her discovery. He told them they'd scoured every inch and still couldn't find the plant they wanted. Then the second Takumi hit the ground, boom, he spotted one instantly. He When he asked Claire if this miracle really worked on the capwort plant too, she didn't beat around the bush. She confirmed his hunch and admitted, yeah, that's exactly what she'd been assuming. Isabel grinned, saying the story lines up perfectly with her analysis, and that he really does have a gift worth praising, sure, but Takumi was sitting on a detail he never told Claire. He revealed the herb didn't come from anywhere, it burst up from the ground right between his fingers, and it only happened once he started picturing what a capwort plant was supposed to be. Then the conversation snapped onto a new track when Claire practically burst with excitement, asking Takumi if he'd finally managed to dry the capwort, only for Isabel, his old companion, to jump in and swear he really had, then add, stunned, that it dried out the moment he picked it. Oh, he's right, Takumi finally confessed it. He'd been praying the plant would dry up faster, and Isabel immediately caught another crazy detail. His power didn't just work on plants, it could flip their state into exactly what he was searching for. The young guy with the gift hesitated, wondering if being able to grow any plant except vegetables, and have it ready on command was genuinely awesome or just secretly niche and kind of boring. Isabel leaned in and dropped one last piece of advice on the young man. This power wasn't a toy, it came with real responsibility. She made it clear that what he did with it was his choice, and only he could decide whether it ever reached its full potential. Then she sealed it with her final warning, think hard before you use it. They reminded him that his gift was the kind of rare wonder you don't just stumble upon. And once the analysis was finished, Takumi and the others headed home, where a servant or guard greeted them at the door and called them, "Milady, Mr. Takumi." The servant burst in and announced, "Dinner's ready, come and get it." The servant told Takumi and Ms. Leo to drop their stuff in their room, then come meet them for dinner. Because tonight, his road of learning how to grow herbs with that one-of-a-kind gift finally reached its stop, leaving him with a sharper grasp of his power and a straight-up reminder to think hard about how he'll use it next. Takumi let out a deep, satisfied sigh while Leo, his mighty canine partner, sat close, soaking up a gentle pat, and the whole moment felt so warm it sounded like a soft W. Takumi got flung into a whole new world, and the dog's presence gave him a gut-deep rush of relief. He shouted to the animal Leo come here, and lavished her with praise for how perfectly she behaved during their whole trip into town. He praised her for staying calm when people tried to pet her, calling her a good girl, then went AWO, and ruffled the fur on her head because her cool demeanor had proved to everyone in town she wasn't scary at all. As Takumi remembered that recent incident, his admiration only grew, and he cheered her for stopping those bad guys from hurting them, ending with a great job. That came straight from his heart. Then Leo's confidence absolutely skyrocketed. With her right beside him, he declared he was ready, whatever this new world hurled at him next. Right in the middle of that sweet, tender moment, bam, someone knocked at the door. Takumi jolted, then snapped himself together and stammered, "Oh, yeah, right." The door creaked open with a sharp kerchak and a maid named Isla leaned in just enough to speak. "Mr. Takumi Malady is waiting for you in the dining room." The moment the scene slid into the dining room, dinner was already over, and Takumi burst out, praising the meal like it was pure magic, saying he absolutely loved it. The food really was that good, so he scraped every last bite off his plate, and the chef, so happy by the non-stop praise, answered him with a smile. There's no higher praise than hearing someone light up over your cooking, especially after a successful meal. Takumi sat down with Claire the milady and sparked up a tense, eye-to-eye conversation. He reminded her that he'd opened up a little about himself yesterday, and then straight up asked if she could tell him more about herself today. Claire looked totally thrown off for a second, then quickly snapped that she had no plans to talk about herself. Takumi wouldn't let it go. He pressed her, begging to know why she lived there, why she ran such a massive villa, and why the whole town acted like she was untouchable. Claire finally spilled the whole story, starting with why she fought for her independence, and said living on her own was the only way to carve herself and her sister away from their father. Takumi snapped back that it was a little extreme, and Claire admitted her dad really did dote on them. Then she rushed to add the catch: that affection turned into him relentlessly scouting suitors for her non-stop. She told the nightmare story how she had to reject 5 different men in one single day, and it drained her completely. Even when they tried to talk about anything else, she said the conversation always slid right back to finding potential suitors, almost every day. Her frustration hit a breaking point when she admitted everything had blown up. He wasn't just involved anymore, he was pushing suitors onto Talora too, even though she's only 10. The whole situation was so wildly absurd that she exploded into a long, furious rant, her complaints stacked on top of each other until Claire ended up being stuck listening to her talk about her father for half an hour. Claire finally broke the silence with a cough and a quick apology, admitting that her outburst was totally unbecoming. Takumi pushed the conversation right back to the townspeople, saying they treat her with serious respect, and you can feel it the second she's mentioned. Claire answered his question and then dropped the bombshell. Their current family head is her father and he rules the whole surrounding land, Rattos included. Then she hit Takumi with the real bombshell. Turns out the kingdom officially recognizes the Libert family as a bloodline of dukes. Takumi froze, the shock playing on his face, and when she saw his reaction, Claire broke down the entire noble hierarchy for him, step by step. He broke it down like a ladder from top to bottom: Duke, Marquis, Margrave, Count, Viscount, and then Baron, yet the way he tossed that address off so casually left me utterly stunned. Takumi instantly bowed his head and fired off the most humble apologies, because the way he'd treated Lady Clare so casually was downright unacceptable. Claire smoothly settled him down, then gently insisted, "Go on, talk to me just like you've been doing this whole time." She pushed him to relax, and honestly, he's got full permission to kick back with her the same way he does with Talora. After thinking it through for a second, Takumi saw that Malady wasn't backing down and finally agreed to ditch the super formal speech. Takumi, an Isekai traveler, stumbled onto something bigger than he ever imagined, a mystery linking his dog, Leo, straight to the local Silver Fenrir legends. Claire shoved him back into their earlier talk about the royal crest, the one that showed a shiny silver Fenrir. Then she flashed their family crest and said the Labert clan had one too, engraved with a silver Fenrir, bearing its teeth and razor-sharp fangs. That brutal stance screamed, "If we feel like it, we'll crush anybody in our way." She then spilled the real reason the Fenrir mattered to her family's noble name. Back in the day, a silver Fenrir actually got along with the Liberts, and with its help they crushed wave after wave of wars until the kingdom finally crowned the Libert family with nobility for what they'd done. So because of all that, the Libert family has kept honoring the silver Fenrirs for generations and generations. Claire pointed out that this history made it crystal clear why only a handful of people wouldn't even know silver Fenrirs existed out here. Takumi sat there thinking to himself that this old history had to explain why his dog Leo ended up as one of these majestic creatures, right when the conversation finally hit its peak. Claire's guardian, the same man who first swallowed his pride and apologized for Takumi's late arrival to the Mana analysts, gestured him over. "Mr. Takumi," he said, "just a moment if you please," and whispered a cryptic question, and Takumi wasted no time. He pulled out everything he needed to get ready. Takumi's eyes flew wide when it finally clicked what that thing really meant. Takumi stormed back to Clare and her younger companion, Talora, clutching two tiny, wrapped presents. He instantly got flustered, started mumbling out his thanks and said they'd been a massive help, then admitted he just wanted to show how grateful he was because he was sure those items would look perfect on them. At last he blurted, "Please take them." Claire grabbed her gift and Takumi handed Laura hers next. He leaned in and told Claire he'd try to be more casual but admitted he couldn't promise anything. He'd gotten used to this way of acting and he could only hope she'd love the present. Claire tore into the gift, snapped open the box and let out a loud gasp. "Oh my god, it's even prettier than I could have imagined." Takumi's face lit up at her reaction. He told her he was so happy she liked it, and with the hairpin now on, Claire blurted, "So, how do I look?" Takumi grinned, said the hairpin made her even more beautiful, and Claire flushed and shouted, "I look awful and adorable." Totally missing the compliment as Takumi just watched her smile and eagerly looked ahead to the day she'd finally feel comfortable with him. The guy who'd talked with Takumi just stared, caught up in the moment, sighing wishing he could be young again. Because Takumi's new life, wrapped in nobility and history with that magnificent secret silver Fenrir ready to blow minds, was nothing short of an epic adventure. Takumi. He dove headfirst into his new world's secrets buried in a brutal book packed with medicinal plans, then shut it with a grin and said, "All right, let's try this," pointing straight to a specific plant illustration. He strode up to Claire and with a polite bow asked for her permission, "Can I use the garden?" Claire first figured he just wanted to mess around with Ms. Leo, but Takumi shut that down fast. He admitted his real plan was to test his gift. He went on to say he wanted to uncover which plants he could grow with his herb cultivation, so he could nurture useful herbs and make them thrive. Claire didn't hesitate, she handed him access and said, "You'll see it," and just like that the whole space was his to take. Takumi kicked off his experiment by zeroing in on the very plant he'd studied. This book swore it had thick, jagged leaves, and inside was a jelly-like goo packed with healing powers. Takumi couldn't help staring, this felt way too much like aloe vera right from his homeworld. Seeing the foreign script like it was nothing, he dropped to his knees in the dirt, sucked in a deep breath, locked in his focus, and declared, "All right, here we go." He pressed his hand into the soil and commanded the herbs to grow. Thick, jagged leaves tore up out of the dirt with loud asterisk shwoop asterisk and asterisk shwoo asterisk, and Claire, along with her companion, Talora, watched it all unfold. Takumi watched as he managed to grow a tiny plant, and Talora erupted in pure joy. She burst into happy tears, yelling, "That was amazing!" while Leo let out a delighted "oh." And Claire's companion just sat there, stunned, watching it all unfold. Takumi showed him the outcome, then asked if he truly understood what he was choosing to grow. Takumi nodded, confirming he'd spotted Lo's entry in the book, and the moment he did, he realized it matched a plant from his own home world. And the gentleman finally showed just how savage the Lo really was. Lo's jelly snaps injuries shut in the blink of an eye. It could seal a bone-deep gash and keep it from leaving a scar, but it still couldn't stop the kind of injuries that only mortals can't survive. He also said nobody knows where Lo's native regions are, and unlike Earth, it doesn't grow in clusters, so yeah, it's downright rare, and that rarity is why it's worth so much here. A business proposal took center stage because the Lo healing power was so unreal, people started arguing about its money potential. Claire's guardian said the Liebert family would welcome any medicinal plant at all since they didn't have any stocked. Takumi stared at his gift and felt its insane power, then couldn't stop asking himself what one single Lo was worth. Claire's guardian told him, "Sell it and you can probably buy a house with the money," and that bombshell lit a fire in Clare. He leaned in and asked Takumi if he wanted to open a shop that sold medicinal herbs. Takumi nodded immediately, desperate to earn his own money since he couldn't stomach living off handouts. Claire, as a noble, wasted no time and offered the Liberty family her full support. She even pushed for a partnership where Takumi could step back while the Liberties took care of the logistics, and the Dukes handled the selling and marketing, so every buyer would feel confident the goods were real and top quality. The Libert family had a legendary track record in commercial hustle, running all kinds of businesses at home and abroad, so they'd take charge of the whole operation, and in return, Takumi would get paid handsomely. She still pointed out one harsh truth: if you grow only the low end, the market value will crash. Claire made it crystal clear, in the end it was all Takumi's call. If he wanted to open and run that store all by himself, she wouldn't stand in his way. Takumi. He admitted his business skills weren't exactly top-notch and that owning a business didn't light him up, but he still grinned and happily signed on to the deal. Claire, terrified by how her father hunted suitors like it was a mission, snapped that they'd have to hammer out every detail of the contract between him and them first, before anything else. Bracing for the face-to-face with her father, she tried to dodge his outlandish demand for marriage, while a mysterious leaf and a steamy bath interlude set the stage. After the business talk wrapped up, Takumi stayed in the garden for hours, flipping through that book again and again, then putting his gear through its paces. While Talora and Leo tore around the garden, Takumi's curiosity surged as he spotted a plant said to crush exhaustion. A wild idea pushed him to grow a mysterious leaf he'd never seen, and it wasn't even listed in the borrowed book. He carefully set the leaf down and told himself he'd deal with it later, the next. The scene was pure comfort. Leo tore through a steaming bowl of noodles, and that meat sauce smeared across her face like a delicious crime. Claire stared at the wreckage and declared without hesitation that Ms. Leo was in desperate need of a serious cleaning. She cooed while scolding the dog, "Those stains won't scrub out with a napkin and she's got a dirty mouth." Then Takumi burst out laughing and grabbed the big dog to bathe it. The tub turned into a chaotic wet war. Loud splashes, scrubbing, and a full-on woo. As he went to work, Takumi leaned over and teased Leo, warning him, "Get ready, I'm about to splash you." He scrubbed her down with relentless care, clocking just how grimy she'd gotten. Eventually, he went up and confirmed it, clean as a whistle now. "Nice work sticking it out, Leo." Afterward, Takumi sank into the giant tub and let himself soak in a relaxing bath, praising the hot water as it worked wonders and breathed fresh life back into his body. Later, he finally stepped out and demanded the attendant let him wipe Leo's body dry, and the attendant agreed without hesitation. Then Claire turned to Takumi and praised him, saying he'd done an amazing job keeping the dog so clean. Ms. Leo looked straight up flawless, and Claire snuggled in close face first like she was in heaven. She gushed that she loved how Ms. Leo's fur felt. "It's amazing," she said, and Takumi lit up with pride. "Yep, Leo's fur is gorgeous, isn't it?" And that's when the whole quest into the Claire ended the moment by kicking things off with a brand new topic tied to the Silver Fenrir lore. They led him into the forest where they'd first met, and Takumi snapped that it was the same forest with Caport. Then she leaned in and told a legend. Long ago, the Liberty family's first head crossed these woods, at least that's what the story says. Claire stepped up and locked eyes with Takumi, then fired off a bold question. Would he and Ms. Leo come with her into the deepest part of that forest? The way she asked it screamed one thing. A brand new adventure was about to ignite, ready to uncover the forest's secrets, the very place where Takumi and Leo started their new life. After Claire threw out her daring request to plunge into the forest's depths, the idea that Takumi and Ms. Leo should come with her on something that dangerous slammed everyone's nerves, and even Takumi himself froze, blurting that he didn't think she could ask him to do this again. Claire's guardian Sebastian and the maids Layla and Gerda snapped into panic, shouting Malady. Claire Malady's senses prickled. She stopped cold, murmured, "Hold on," and before anyone could react, Sebastian blurted out immediately. He mumbled an apology for speaking out of line, then slammed his point down. He had to say what he meant. Because even with Mr. Takumi and Ms. Leo riding beside her, stepping into the Fenrir forest was sheer madness, and Sebastian couldn't picture a single person making it back unscathed. Layla and Gerda jumped on Sebastian's plea, begging him on Milady Claire's behalf, because it was her curiosity that was really pulling the strings. She said the very first Liebert ever met a silver Fenrir inside that forest, and now the real shock hits. How in the world did he become friends with one? Even she couldn't crack it. Then she said there was proof the head later ended up boxed in by Fenrir's jaws, and that's when the silver Fenrir burst in out of nowhere. That nor wasn't written in the documents. About half of the first head's life was the clue. Maybe the answers were buried in the forest's untamed depths, the place everyone fears and still respects. Sebastian's resistance came from one thing: pure terror of the other creatures living there. Claire snapped him out of it and pointed out the truth. Ms. Leo was nothing like a normal Fenrir. Regular Fenrirs might not hit as hard as silver ones, but their fangs and claws weren't as razor-sharp. They were smaller, and they weren't nearly as swift, though the story wasn't done. Dangerous as hell, because when they can command fire and ice magic, humans don't stand a chance, and he made it clear. Even the regular Fenrirs were still way faster than any human. Claire insisted they'd go, because someone tied to her by blood had formed a friendship with a silver Fenrir. She watched Takumi burst in out of nowhere, saw Leo completely change, and felt it in her bones like fate itself had demanded it, then held on to Takumi's choice and Leo's confident promise. Claire snapped off the loud arguing between her retainers like she was shutting a gate. She reminded them she wasn't looking for their asterisk ideas at all. She was asking Takumi for his input. Sebastian couldn't ignore the guilt and rushed to apologize to Claire for their outrageous interruption. Then Claire whipped back to Takumi, fired off the same question again, and demanded to know if he'd join her as she headed into the forest. Takumi clocked it instantly. Claire didn't look like the type to accept no and walk away. Takumi hung his head and asked if she'd mind. Could he talk it over with Leo first? Claire didn't even hesitate. Please, by all means. Then Takumi turned to Leo and started, I'd like to. Telling her that Claire wants them to tag along to the forest where they'd been. Leo just murmured, okay. And Takumi thought, guess she's like, I don't see why we wouldn't. Then Leo brought up Sebastian's fear that Fenrirs might strike them somewhere deep inside that forest, and Leo's sharp words made Takumi realize that she clearly knew exactly what she was talking about, because something just clicked in his head and he finally understood that. Leo believed the silver Fenrirs were his friends, so if they showed up, everything would be fine. Because even the other Fenrirs wouldn't dare strike their own kin, and he was sure the forest's other monsters were even weaker than the Fenrirs. And she could still take them head-on even if they started hurling pack after pack at her. Takumi froze for a second, shocked that he could actually understand her words, and even more stunned that Leo knew so much about Fenrir and Silver Fenrir. He shoved the thoughts aside and moved on. Leo had basically decided it was fine for Claire and him to hit the forest, then he stormed back to her and declared, "Claire, we've made up our minds, don't worry, we'll be right there with you." Claire was thrilled, but Sebastian stayed on edge, pressing Takumi for proof that this was really the right move. Takumi said he'd settled it with Leo, then when they pushed him about how he could understand her, he shrugged that living together for so long gave him a pretty good feel for what she meant. Then he proved it by asking Leo to nod, and she did. Sebastian finally caved, because once he understood that Fenrir's instinctively submit to silver Fenrir's, there was no denying it. He gave the okay to start the prep tomorrow, so Claire, Takumi, and Ms. Leo could finally set off the day after. A weird leaf and a power nobody saw coming threw everything into chaos, and after that long debate, Claire finally slammed the brakes and decided it was time to call it a day. She told Takumi she'd spill her thoughts about the forest later, along with Ms. Leo, because she didn't want Sebastian and the rest of the staff overhearing. Takumi couldn't stop thinking about that forest and the horrible memory of being trapped inside it. Not to mention the orcs lurking around, something about this place felt off. Suspicion clung to him, then he caught Leo sniffing a leaf he'd set aside, a leaf he'd somehow cultivated through herb cultivation. This leaf was totally new to him, no book he'd ever touched mentioned it at all, so all he had to go on was the wild idea that it could be an herb for healing. Before Takumi could stop her, Leo snatched the leaf and crunched it with a loud nom, then just like that, energy surged through him. Enclosed in a blazing aura, he burst into the scene as glowing sparkles and twinkling sound effects lit up the whole moment. Takumi asked how she felt and Leo barked in pure joy like, "See, it's just that exhaustion," loud and clear. She disappeared from the situation, and when she came back she felt better than ever, like that experience had forged her into something stronger. Takumi froze in disbelief, realizing he might have just grown something completely out of this world, and now he knew he'd have to keep running more trial and error in that garden. The hyped-up Leo bounced around like a live wire, but Takumi snapped him out of it. "You've got a trip in 2 days, bedtime." He let her keep playing a little longer, then the moment passed and it was lights-out bedtime. The party was gearing up to leave the villa, and Claire's guardian, Sebastian, was right there with them. Much huffed in disbelief. "I can't believe you said that, Sebastian." And while Sebastian stood by the carriage chatting with the maids, he calmly told them that sure, Takumi and Miss Leo are solid, but when it comes to safety you've got to stick with more than one person. He declared the guards would ride along too, and while Takumi tried to smooth the nerves, he told Claire he just knew he was only thinking of her best interests. After the last goodbyes were shouted, the crew climbed into their carriage, yanked forward by a team of horses. Still, Takumi, dragged from a world where magic doesn't exist, didn't sweat the carriage ride one bit. He kept his eyes on the strange way they were carrying him. He cornered Layla, one of the maids, and demanded how long the trip to the forest would take. She shot back that it would be about 3 hours. As they rode along, Layla asked what kind of transportation they used back on his home world, and Takumi found himself explaining the main mode of travel, right then, mid-journey. He laid out this wild device that could run by itself, then asked, "Okay, how does it work?" and explained that back in his home world vehicles could move without horses pulling them. Sebastian and Layla nearly fell off their seats when Takumi hinted that his world was all about magic-free life, and then he spilled the truth. They power everything with tech, like a self-running metal crate that only needs liquid fuel to kick into gear. He explained that this fuel got burned to crank out the energy they needed, and Layla worried a metal crate would be too heavy to lug around. But Takumi shot back that it worked just fine, then he laid out the whole breakthrough in plain terms. Since magic was off the table, they had to crank their minds into overdrive and turn tech into pure, creative firepower. Claire's eyes lit up and she blurted out how marvelous Takumi's craftsmanship was, while Takumi stood there, heart pounding, remembering a quote he'd read, "In a world like this where magic is everywhere, any technology that's advanced enough would look just like magic." To layman Layla, everything inside his world's tech wonders felt like straight-up magic, like fire magic and forest preparations, until Sebastian. They declared the horses had hit their limit, and he swore that was as far as those poor beasts could possibly go. The horses were roped to a tree and told to stay put until the men came back to their exact spot, while Layla, one of the maids, was ordered to start making lunch. Sebastian told Takumi to team up with the guards and grab branches for a fire, so they hauled back the wood, and then Leo made it crystal clear with her actions, she was going to strike the match. Sebastian's eyes lit up and he agreed on the spot. No way was he turning down the chance to witness a silver Fenrir's magic. Then Leo hurls fire magic like it's nothing at all, and Sebastian can't help staring in pure, jaw-dropping awe. They couldn't believe the day finally arrived. Watching a silver Fenrir cast magic in front of his eyes was pure mind-blowing awe, and Clare, who'd already seen those magical feat, stared in shock too, finally getting it. That's exactly how silver Fenrir unleashed their spells. Once Leo got that fire going, Layla turned to her and thanked her for the service, like it was no small feat. After lunch, the guards and Clare geared up Takumi for the deadlier run deep into the forest. Then Clare's attendant thrust a sword into his hands, making it crystal clear it was for safety. She figured they needed those weapons because nobody knew what waited for them in the forest, and at worst, he'd use them to hack through the ivies. Takumi, who'd never even held one before, took it with shaking hands and said, "Thank you." Leo took point and the whole crew hit the road on foot as her insane sense of smell guided every step. Clare barked out orders, "Keep pushing until you hit the river, because that waterway would be your checkpoint before you dare go deeper." Takumi and the others pushed on through the trek and then, right as they got near, the rushing water hit his ears, telling him they were seconds from the river. Before the sounds could go on, a low, guttural growl ripped through the air. Leo's. Takumi's gut tightened and he blurted, "Leo, what's got her growling?" Suddenly, one of the expedition guys screamed that things had turned into an orc crisis, and the next voice snapped, "Sebastian, stop advancing." Two armored guards snapped their swords free, swearing no single finger would ever reach M-Lady. Takumi snapped into action the moment he sensed the danger, yanked out his brand new sword and steeled himself with one thought, "If they're going to clash, I'm swinging too." Then the orcs crashed into view, screaming war cries and snarling like beasts, and three pig-like monsters burst onto the battlefield. Orcs blasted the air with brutal noise, howls and growls ripping through the dark in a dozen different terrifying tones. The fight snapped to an end fast. Leo hurled himself forward and smashed through the orcs, plowing them aside with pure, brutal power. Then blam, a thunderous clash filled the air, and just like that, the threat was wiped out in an instant. The whole party, guards and all, including Takumi, froze in stunned silence as the silver Fenrir's sheer power tore the air apart. Yumi finally shattered the silence and shouted, "Leo." Then he crouched down and ruffled the triumphant dog, praising her like a champ. "You did great, Leo." The silver Fenrir answered with a pleased AWO. That short, terrifying clash drove the point home to everyone. Leo's power wasn't just massive, it was effortless. And with that proof in hand, they finally dared to push deeper into the Fenrir forest, where things got far more dangerous. The next scene kicked off the very second Ms. Leo crushed the orcs in an instant. The silver Fenrir's brutal power lit up the sky, and the whole party, the Duke's guards, the maids, and even Clare, froze in total shock. One of the men was still reeling from the sheer brute force, muttering that he had to fix his dumb mistake, thinking those orcs were real threats, because silver Fenrir's strength was way beyond anything he'd imagined. Then the armed personnel started dropping jaws left and right. The guards straight up couldn't believe it. Clare was just as shocked, admitting that even veteran warriors still treated orcs like a genuine, scary threat. Standing over the defeated orcs, Takumi realized the real nightmare wasn't the fight, it was the mountains of heavy carcasses, and that's when he spotted his chance. The weird herb he'd grown by pure accident right before their trip. He snatched the mysterious herb in a blink. It looked like an ordinary leaf, and shoved it toward the guards, swearing that eating it would let them haul the orc limbs without breaking a sweat. Still, those orcs were absolute monsters in weight, and the guards didn't trust a thing, especially when the herb was that sickly, ghastly color. Even with their nerves screaming at them, one guard took a bite, and to everyone's shock, it tasted weirdly good, like the sweet, fizzy flavor of a soft drink. After the group devoured that leaf, pure disbelief hit them. Now the orcs' bodies felt weightless like feathers on the wind. And it didn't stop with the first guy. Another guard soon staggered too, feeling even lighter in his own skin. The change hit like lightning, and it worked instantly. Clare's companion, staring in disbelief, blurted out to Takumi, "What did we eat?" And Takumi was just as stunned by how powerful it was. He could only admit one thing: what he had found was pure coincidence, and all he really knew was that it came from good old trial and error while growing herbs. Clare, still wiped out from the journey, grabbed Takumi's attention and insisted, "We're almost at our first goal, just a little more." Takumi smiled and promised, "A river's waiting for us." So the whole group pushed on, powered by the mysterious herb's lightness. Soon, they burst through and hit the riverside checkpoint. Claire, drained and shaking, finally let out a relieved breath like she could breathe for the first time in days. Leo, bursting with her usual unstoppable energy, bolted off to tear into the brand new terrain. They agreed this place was the perfect spot to set up camp. A riverside spot where they could camp for the day. Guards wasted no time, jumped into action and pitched the tents they needed right away. Once the tents were pitched and dinner finally hit the table, Yumi and the crew snapped into action, locking eyes on the serious mission of setting up a night watch. You couldn't let your guard down for a second in this forest. Monsters could burst out of the shadows at any moment. Takumi admitted he'd basically forgotten the whole idea back in his original world. Nobody ever needed a night watch, so it never even crossed his mind. Sebastian grabbed control of the whole plan, mapping every shift into neat 3-hour blocks, then pushed a starting rotation to get everything moving. Takumi practically snatched the job for the first watch on the spot, and Sebastian tried to talk him out of it, insisting he shouldn't worry since it was smarter to hand it off to someone who hadn't done it before. Takumi pushed back anyway, insisting he'd join in. Sure, he wasn't used to it, but he was going to. He was more than capable since Leo was right there with him. Sebastian, seeing that unshakable fire in his eyes, finally gave in and agreed. The first watch would be led by Mr. Takumi and Ms. Leo starting at exactly 10 o'clock. He figured out that this 3-hour shift was basically the same as 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. back home. That evening, Takumi and Leo finally dropped into their watch shift. Beneath that towering forest canopy, most of the light vanished and the stars lit up the sky overhead like they were right in their faces. Tsukumi settled beside the flames Leo had kicked to life with magic earlier. Heavy's lingering feeling wouldn't let go of him, even after everything. Claire had him worried sick and he kept thinking, if only I could find a way to actually help her. About an hour into his shift, right when he started counting down, 1 more hour left, he spotted Claire closing in on the fire, and when she met his eyes, Takumi immediately motioned for her to sit right beside him so she wouldn't feel left out. Claire gave a quiet thank you and slid down next to the warm flames. Claire shattered the quiet and told him she tracked him down because she needed to talk. There was a secret she hadn't told the others yet, and she was sure Sebastian and the rest weren't ready to hear it. Claire slipped in beside Takumi at the campfire during his night watch, right after she made that dramatic announcement that she needed to talk. Something just couldn't wait, and the night turned tense as the scene continued. The talk kicked off when Claire beamed and told him, "Thank you for everything and for taking me to the woods," and Takumi brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. He just shrugged, saying he wasn't only going with her, he was genuinely interested in coming here too. Claire wouldn't let it go. She had to get it off her chest, so she blurted out a huge apology, heartsick over her guilt and pleading for Takumi's forgiveness, then laid out the whole mess of how her very first request to join the expedition happened. The moment she first begged Takumi and Leo to join her in the woods, Sebastian chewed her out, then calmly laid it out. Dukes sit at the very top, so their family isn't allowed to bark orders unless there's a real reason. Sebastian told her it was her question said just right. That left him no real way to refuse, even though they'd only just met, and Claire admitted with a rush of guilt that she'd been forcing. She pinned the blame on him with no room to argue, and the moment it happened, she realized being part of a duke's household meant she had no right to act like that. Yumi, always calm and understanding, swept the blame right off her shoulders, instantly, while he shrugged it off too, insisting he wasn't the kind of person who ever said no when someone came asking for help. With the tension finally cracking, Takumi threw out a trade. "You tell me why you came to the woods," he said, "and then we're even." She finally spilled the truth. This wasn't about the woods at all. Her real obsession was the ancient silver Fenrir legend, and she made it crystal clear that's what she was chasing. The rumor ignited the second she was born. The servants swear Claire could be the reincarnation of the Liebert family's very first head. This idea grew from her uncanny looks. She basically wore the family founder's face. The story of the first head wasn't told in words but in paintings. Claire remembered spotting one not long after the first head was born, and when she saw it she knew because the woman in the picture looked exactly like Claire. Takumi couldn't shake the idea. When the first head turned out to be a woman and Claire grew up to look exactly like her paintings, the truth locked in for him. He remembered that first head as a fearless warrior who tore through enemy lines, scattering them on the battlefield. So of course the servants started banking on Claire, because if she really was the supposed reincarnation, then prosperity was headed straight for the Liebert family. Claire's father, the current duke, flat out rejected that idea, and he pushed Claire just as hard, telling her not to buy into it either. He made it crystal clear that she didn't have to play the role of the first head, she could live by her own beliefs, no mask required. Claire couldn't stop thanking her father for never wavering because with his support, she finally had the freedom to grow into exactly who she was. Even with her father's guidance and her need to stay true to herself, that old alliance hanging over her family refused to fade, she couldn't ignore it. Claire finally admitted the real reason behind her obsession. The moment she heard about the silver Fenriers, her heart started sprinting. That impossible pull toward the legendary creatures drove every dangerous step into the Fenrir forest, and it's exactly why she felt forced to hunt down her family's ancient past, partnering with a living silver Fenrir Leo to do it. By the campfire in the dead of night, Claire and Takumi kept talking, until Claire finally admitted the truth about her obsession with silver Fenriers and how the moment that name comes up, something deep in her ignites and won't let go. She's desperate to figure out what those wild feelings mean, and she's convinced the only answer is out in the woods, right where the first head supposedly encountered a silver Fenrir. This isn't a treasure hunt or some duty she has to fulfill, it's her own raw, personal quest for answers that start from the Takumi soaked in her confession like it was a lifeline, then fired back a sharp question. If they tear through the woods and still never find it, will she really just quit? Claire met my eyes, nodded once, and said yes, like that was all she needed to seal it, turning the whole search into something about pushing forward and maybe uncovering a truth for herself, not promising any one exact result. Takumi felt genuinely moved, like a weight had lifted the moment he realized he'd finally understood what was on her mind. Then Claire quickly apologized for spilling too much. But she begged Takumi and Leo with humble sincerity to guard her secret from everyone else. And Takumi, realizing how personal her search truly was, swore he'd never breathe a word to a single soul. Just as the conversation wound down, Sebastian's stirring footsteps started up nearby. Takumi snapped into duty mode and told them to call it a night, only after they first helped Claire out. He pressed a handful of miraculous leaves into her hands, leftovers from the day before when he accidentally grew them, then begged her to try eating them before she went to sleep. Claire leaned in and asked what they were, and Takumi told her that if she took them, she'd sleep soundly all night, waking up fresh as a daisy. Then it hit her. These weren't just any herbs, they were carefully grown through herb cultivation. Claire shot him a grateful smile, promised she'd dive deeper into his research later, and then, right as the moment hit, what came next? Next morning, the party geared up to shove deeper into the woods, and Takumi, fully rested, was practically buzzing with energy. "All right, everyone, let's go," he cut in, breaking off mid-sentence as the journey resumed. Sebastian, Layla, and the guard Johanna were set to follow the river deeper into the woods with Takumi, Claire, and Leo, while Philip and Nicola stayed behind at the campsite to guard the horses, and he was feeling way better than the day before. Their first trek was brutal, then the deeper they pushed into the forest, the darker everything got, so stepping forward felt like walking blind. Sebastian clocked Takumi's struggle, flicked a tiny burst of light from his hand, and suddenly Takumi realized he was using magic. Sebastian shrugged it off as a low-level light spell, then snapped that Takumi had to guard his mana. Takumi was blown away by how practical the spell was, calling it just so handy, and right then Sebastian stepped in with an offer. "Practice, Mr. Takumi, if you keep at it, you'll be able to cast it too." That little moment ignited a fun, no-holds-barred argument between Claire and Sebastian, who was the better instructor. Claire perked up and practically begged him to let her in. She'd been studying too, and she was ready to teach him everything. Sebastian pushed back hard, claiming he deserved it because he was the one who taught Claire the basics of magic. Then Takumi blinked at the fact that not one but two high-ranking nobles were lining up to teach him, and he accepted their offer. He could pull it off. Then the impasse hit, and a wild idea struck like lightning. For 3 days straight, the crew kept tearing through the search, but by the end of day 3 of searching, and the 4th day since they crashed into the woods, they still hadn't found a single trace of anything. By the evening fire, the brutal truth of their fruitless hunt finally hit. Sebastian snapped that the weirder they got, the more lethal this search would become. Claire. There, feeling the exhaustion and the danger creeping in, he reluctantly admitted defeat, then snapped, "All right, we're done. Let's head back to the manor." We thanked everyone for indulging her whims, and Takumi stared at her like, "They all know about those rumors," because in a place like this, everyone had to be trying to calm her nerves. Takumi's frustration kept climbing. He couldn't stand it, wishing he could do something because at this pace they were going to head back home empty-handed. Takumi whipped his head toward Leo, blurted, "What do we do now?" Then lightning hit. He finally saw the hidden power in his own gift. He'd been sitting on herb cultivation the whole time. "I need you, Leo," he said, reaching out for Leo's paw. And just like that, Takumi's new plan snapped into place, using his rare gift and Leo's silver Fenrir powers to slam the door on failure and reach their goal. Right after Takumi clocked that his herb-growing gift might be the missing piece to their hunt, he leaned in and told Leo the real secret he'd missed all along, his power to grow rare herbs, and in the same breath he realized he could craft one that eases fatigue for everyone, turning their stuck search into something they could finally push through. He blurted out that he should have thought of it earlier, because the clock was already screaming. Tsukumi pressed his hand to Leo's paw and demanded she lend him her mana. Then he shut his eyes and dove headfirst into deep, focused concentration. A burst of light ripped from their hands as the mana poured into the earth, and right before their eyes the ground exploded into a thick carpet of cultivated herbs, sprouting so fast it sounded like sprout. He snatched a sprig of that fresh new herb, then thrust it into the group's hands without a second to waste. The herb kicked in instantly. One of the guards gasped that he felt reborn, fully refreshed and raring to start his training session right this second. Takumi, grinning at the results, said he was relieved it finally worked and that herb didn't just ease his fatigue, it went way deeper. When Takumi demanded Clare to follow him deep into the woods, she stared at the forest and gasped. Somehow the trees looked unnaturally bright, even with the dim light filtering through the shadows. Takumi admitted this was the wild power of the very first herb he'd ever forged, which sharpened their eyes so they can spot everything around them even when the world turns dark. Next, Clare realized her hearing had suddenly blown wide open. Every chirp and screech snapped into focus, loud enough to be described by those over-the-top, cheep-cheep and scree-scree sound effects. Takumi said the second herb was the reason. Once they swallowed it, their hearing sharpened like crazy, and suddenly they could read every sound and shift around them. Claire's eyes went wide when she finally understood what Takumi's gift could do. She could not only sense the creatures in the woods, she could hear them too. With their senses blazing, the party sprinted back into the search, sure that if Fenrir was near, they'd spot it fast, until the sky started to darken and Sebastian grabbed Claire's attention. The sun was slipping away fast. Suddenly, Leo slammed on the brakes and growled a menacing grr, just as the threat caught everyone off guard. Leo's growl ripped through the air again, and Takumi instantly caught on to what her movements were signaling. Monsters are already clashing up ahead, and the whole battlefield is exploding with violence. Leo barked with wild excitement, and right then Takumi felt a jolt of urgency to go investigate. Sebastian froze in disbelief, staring at the mess like it couldn't be real, because a Fenrir was really here. Only he knew the truth, his senses weren't as sharp as Leo's and he hadn't picked it up yet. Even then, he still caught the brutal sounds of the struggle and straight up recognized a Fenrir's unmistakable cries. He snapped to Leo, asking if the woods held any monsters strong enough to take on one, and the moment he sensed how bad it was, he chose to jump in. After Leo's description, Takumi locked onto the clues and was convinced those attacking monsters were trolls. He called them monsters over 3 meters tall, saying troids should have been weaker than a Fenrir, but with sheer numbers stacking up, this was suddenly a real problem. Clare didn't even blink. Fenrir needed saving and they all had to move now. Sebastian, scared of what they'd face, pushed back, insisting the party couldn't possibly take on 5 troids. Clare didn't waver. She spun toward Leo and declared, "I'm counting on you." Takumi shoved Leo forward, telling her to hurry on ahead, and Leo launched like a bullet, a blazing blur that vanished into the forest with a thunderous zoosh. Thanks to Leo's jaw-dropping speed and the herb's power, Takumi managed to stay right on top of the chaos, rescuing Fenrir while the wounded beast fought on, using his sharpened hearing and sight to track every single clash. He could hear the chaos of battle and Leo's rapid strikes, and he was shouting her on in his head. Leo was incredible, period. Then they reappeared out of nowhere, screeched to a stop, and Takumi shot back, "What's wrong?" Leo shoved them toward the fight scene, and there, scorched ground smoked the air with a sharp hiss, like the magic was still burning, proving the battle had already ended. But the thing they hunted was sprawled in front of them, torn up and bleeding. Takumi bolted to check on the Fenrir, and the group finally discovered Dark, heavily injured Fenrir lay barely moving, exhausted, whimpering, and panting hard while Leo kept a watchful eye. The party finally found one, but it was broken, battered, and begging for help. Takumi and the crew loomed over the crushed, grievously injured Fenrir puppy, another victim of the troll attack, and as soon as Claire took one look, she realized the situation was deadly and blurted out. "This was a disaster, so I cornered Sebastian and asked what he thought he'd pull off by checking the wounds. He admitted with regret he wasn't a doctor, and you could tell the party was way too late arriving. He figured the young Fenrir didn't have long to live, and Sebastian hit him with the ugly truth. Even their miracle herb, the Lo, wouldn't be enough, not for wounds this deep. But Takumi wouldn't freeze, the crisis kicked him into motion. If Lo could stitch up those brutal cuts, then he could grow something even stronger." He dropped low to the ground, locked onto his low-level Q, and shut out everything to focus his mind. He was trying to brew an herb that could stitch up a mortal wound in one instant, and the sheer fury of his cultivation power flared into a blazing glow of bright glue all around him. The herb turned into a clear, shimmering jelly, and Takumi snatched it up, wrapped it in a leaf, then dashed over to feed it to the injured pup. He scooped the liquid from the makeshift wrapper, swiped it over Fenrir's wounds with careful precision, and the results hit instantly. Fenrir's dark, lifeless body jolted with a sudden gasp of breath. Sebastian watched the instant recovery and froze. "Mr. Takumi, it healed completely." He studied the creature close up and saw its wounds were finally gone. Claire's shoulders dropped with relief as she cheered, and she couldn't stop praising him, saying he was incredible. Takumi. While Leo barked with pure joy, a relieved Takumi waved off his success as nothing but luck, saying, "I just tried it and got lucky." Sebastian mused. They realized something wild. There really is an herb that can heal mortal wounds. Once the immediate threat was gone, Fenrir collapsed into a deep healing sleep, clearly wrecked and desperate for rest. Sebastian said they had to keep it warm, and they set about it right away, they noted. From how tiny it looked, the creature seemed like a lost pup, like it had been ripped away from its pack. Then the Troids pounced and attacked, and suddenly the big question hit: what on earth were they going to do with the pup? Claire's guardian decided it was time to head back, because the search was finally over. Leo burst into urgent barks at Takumi, making it crystal clear just how she felt. Takumi relayed Leo's unmistakable message to everyone. Leo insisted, "Let's bring the Fenrir back with us." Sebastian shot back right away, insisting Fenrirs are vicious beasts by nature, and if they brought it along, they'd just be daring it to get hit again. Claire threw her full support behind Leo and Takumi, no doubts, no hesitation, because she believed they should back them too. Takumi fired back at Sebastian's worries by pointing to what they'd already talked about: that natural hierarchy. And then he reminded Sebastian of one key fact: how they discussed it with Leo before they even stepped into the woods. He confirmed Leo was totally cool with taking the pup, and then she added that Fenrirs always fall in line for the silver Fenrirs. Sebastian groaned as he reluctantly gave in, then told them they could take it back, just watch it closely. Claire lit up and thanked Sebastian with a grin. Who added 2 strict rules: if the injured Fenrir looked like a real threat, you treat it as hostile, and Ms. Leo must keep a constant watch on it. The whole group roared back to the main campsite, and the other guards were waiting there, right on the edge of shock. Claire stood proud, clutching a tiny Fenrir pup, and the guards went, "No way is that what we think it is." Claire told them Ms. Leo came in and saved it while the Troids were tearing it apart. They spotted the pup stir awake, and the second it opened its eyes, pure terror hit, shuddering at the sight of the humans. Claire soothed his nerves and said, "It's okay." Ms. Leo wouldn't lay a hand on him. A scared little pup started barking in shaky panic, then Leo stepped in, and the two of them launched into an actual conversation. With the quest finally complete, they realized Fenrir really does roam these woods, and now, with their new companion tagging along, the whole party geared up to break out of the forest. Takumi's jaw nearly dropped as the whole situation flipped on its head. First a silver Fenrir and some serious herb growing, now it's a Fenrir puppy right in front of him. He finally got it. His carefree life wasn't happening, but instead of folding, he rode the endless chaos with confidence, grinning as he wondered if this storm would ever let up. After that, they burst out of the wood forest together, breaking free like they'd been chasing the daylight itself. When Philip spotted them, joy lit up his face and he blurted out, asking if everyone was feeling just fine. He spotted another tiny Fenrir and stared at it, totally baffled. Sebastian says they've got a Fenrir puppy and he swears it's totally safe, so stop worrying. When it was time to climb into the carriage, Takumi stared at it and thought, there's no way this tiny thing can fit all of us. So he marched straight to Clare and promised, I'll go with Leo. Then, out of nowhere, the Fenrir puppy lunged at him and showered him with excited licks. It basically screamed that it wanted Takumi, so Clare pulled him in and told him to come with them. Takumi said yes, but a little doubt still clawed at him. Right then Leo stepped in and offered Layla a ride, straight to her rescue. Layla stared, utterly thrown off, and blurted out to Takumi, wait, are we really okay? Takumi nodded, saying yes since Leo had already given the green light, and then they turned around and headed back. As they walked, Claire shot Takumi a quick question, was he fine now and did he actually like where he was sitting? Takumi nodded, yeah. And then, like a sudden flashback, he remembered when Leo used to cram himself right between the sofa's legs. After what felt like forever, they finally barreled back to their mansion. That's when Leo bolted to the other side and started howling the moment he saw it. Everyone went wide-eyed and completely lost, not knowing what on earth was going on. And the wildest part, that Fenrir puppy starts howling too, like it's totally lost in its own confusion. A few tense seconds later, both of them cut the howling and froze in the same breath. Everyone froze, staring and burning with the same question, what in the world was happening? Sebastian started out shaking with nerves, but once he heard Leo's voice, he finally settled down. Takumi decided to dig deeper, and when he asked, Leo told the Fenrir puppy, this is my territory, and welcomed him with open arms. And the Fenrir baby totally went along with it. Claire clocked it instantly, like this was some Fenrir tradition or a special event. And that's when Takumi's heart lit up too, because Leo was smiling and that joy spread straight to him. The moment they stepped inside the mansion, Gelda broke into a warm welcome for them. Claire hissed for her to be silent, because if she didn't, the baby Fenrir would wake up. Talora barreled in, shouting at the top of her lungs, and welcomed everyone like a storm. And she nearly froze when she spotted the cub, then her excitement took over, she just had to play with it. But Claire snapped no, then she disappeared inside and Takumi hurried off to change his clothes. They demanded Gelda whip up some tea for them. After a while they burst back into the hall and Gelda was already there, tea in hand, ready to hit them with comfort. Take a sip of that tea and gush about how damn good it tastes. Right then, Claire and Talora showed up too, and Claire immediately thanked Takumi for everything, every bit of help and hard work he'd done in the forest. Takumi spotted the Fenrir puppy awake and sprinted over to Leo, ready to play, and Claire chimed in that it finally woke up the moment she returned to her chamber. Suddenly she burst into giggles, then he froze and asked, what's wrong? She told me that the moment the Fenrir puppy woke up and saw the room, pure shock hit him, because he'd never seen something like this indoors. So he went looking in every nook and cranny, and he totally felt it was insanely adorable. After that, she leaned in and asked, so, are you ready to tell me what you're testing right now and what you're working on? And his mind started racing on how on earth he could explain it. Suddenly, his vision turned to mush, and then he crashed into unconsciousness. When Takumi finally snapped awake, it felt like his skull was about to burst. But the moment he looked up, he spotted Sebastian, Claire, and Leo crowding around him. Sebastian laid out the whole scenario and Takumi suddenly snapped back like, wait, he's exactly right, I'm right in the middle of this conversation. Before Takumi even got a word out, Leo burst into joyful licking, practically celebrating him. He tried to stop her but Leo barreled on anyway, then Claire asked if he could move and he shot back, yes. Then they leaned in and replayed every moment that just happened. Takumi said his vision suddenly went blurry and he dropped out cold the moment it happened. Between everything, Sebastian dropped the bomb that Takumi's fainting might have been triggered by his own special gift, and Takumi blurted out, completely baffled, how? Sebastian warned that if a gift user overdoes it, they can actually black out, but everyone's still arguing about whether it's the gift doing the damage or the person behind it. Takumi was still completely lost, like his mind couldn't latch onto what was happening. Sebastian told everyone that Takumi might have had extra powers, and that news hit him so hard he straight up fainted. They sat down for a serious talk because the longer the gift stays active, the heavier the price crushes the person. Till now, it was all just a shot in the dark. Maybe it wasn't his luck at all, but Takumi's special energy growth that hit so hard it made him faint. Sebastian told him that the moment Takumi fainted, the Fenrir puppy went limp and stopped moving for good. Takumi cooked up a theory. The herb hadn't fully healed the Fenrir puppy, so it kicked back into action in the hall, and that's what made him collapse and faint. He told Takumi to stop growing things for a bit, but Takumi figured it wasn't a full stop he needed, just avoiding anything that would leave a lasting mark. Claire snapped, telling him to stop battering himself so hard, then she pressed him again about his tests. He admitted that once the new leaf popped up, he planted it in his room and didn't do anything else, and Leo ended up eating it. Boom, Leo got a surge of new energy and felt way better. Claire connected the dots instantly, saying it was just like the herb she'd given them in the forest, and Leo finally realized he couldn't obsess over how something looks, he had to focus on what it does. Sebastian pressed Takumi, so you just wished for the plant and it showed up, and Takumi nodded yeah. Claire heard it and lit up with excitement, but Sebastian snapped that Takumi should think about the plant trouble and how the damage could linger. Takumi nodded, then promised he'd craft herbs Claire could sell on one condition: he wouldn't risk his life, so if she was truly ready, he was locked on to that deal. She thanked Takumi and rushed to tell her father about it, then reality hit fast because marriage offers started flooding in. Right after that, Takumi leaned in and asked if they'd finally settled on a name for the Fenrir puppy. Claire quickly checked the Fenrir puppy, desperate to figure out if it was a boy or a girl. When they checked, they uncovered the truth: she was a girl. Sebastian tossed out a name, and she immediately shot it down. Suddenly, she revealed a name and said she'd call the Fenrir puppy Sherry, someone who's loved. Then Sherry's face lit up with a smile the moment she heard it. Suddenly, without warning, Sherry started glowing and everyone gasped as they watched it bloom. Then the light dimmed a little. Claire stared at Sherry, completely baffled, while Takumi demanded whether Leo understood what just happened, only for Leo to shake his head and say he had no clue. Sebastian leaned in and demanded, could Sherry really have formed a familiar contract? When he learned long ago, he realized that the moment you give your name and the monsters accept it, a familiar bargain instantly clicks into place. Claire leaned in and asked Sherry if she'd really become her close partner, then Sherry just flashed a smile. Sebastian leaned in and told her, congratulations. Claire thanked Takumi, because without him none of it would have been possible. At first he refused to accept her thanks, but the moment he saw Sherry smiling like she'd been given her life back, his face finally lit up. The next morning rolled in and Takumi spotted the houseworkers standing there, pale-faced and absolutely terrified. He leaned in and grilled Claire about Talora while she wasn't even looking around, then Claire shrugged, saying Talora was still asleep because she'd woken up late last night. She also let it slip that something massive was about to go down, right when their father rolled in that evening. Sebastian leaned in and said maybe her father's on his way to check on her health. Takumi frowned in confusion and then Sebastian pressed, do you remember that first day when Claire went out searching for herbs? Her dad was freaking out and when they finally came back they tried to send a message, but it didn't even get delivered. Takumi leaned in and demanded to know why Claire's face was set like stone, like she was bracing for her dad to show up. She admitted she was terrified of the proposals her father was about to bring in. He leaned in and demanded to know if she was about to reject them all. She blurted out yes, saying Talora is too young to have a fiancé and so is she. And on top of that, Takumi had to face his father for the real talk, an agreement to sell herbs, but man, he was totally lost on how to act with proper manners. She told him to calm down, insisting her father wouldn't care about any of it, so now Takumi couldn't stop wondering what kind of man he really was. Then Talora showed up and the moment they explained what happened, she went completely still, like her whole body hit mute. After dinner, everyone huddled up to plot their perfect ways to shoot down those proposals. Till then, Takumi quizzed Layla about what he should wear, acting like his normal outfit was good enough to meet Mr. Duke, until Layla reminded him of the clothes he'd stashed back in Rattos and he immediately decided to go grab them. Layla rode alongside him because she'd been ordered to keep an eye on Takumi on the way. They burst into the shop and the worker immediately started pitching his clothes like it was the hottest thing in town. He tore back to the mansion and right at the gate Claire and Sebastian were waiting to greet him. But then they told him Mr. Duke was already here and everyone agreed to follow the plan like it was locked in. Every last one of them greeted Mr. Duke Eckenhart right on the spot. And he fired back with a grin. Then he greeted Mr. Duke and quickly bowed his head, apologizing for all the trouble he'd caused. Eckenhart's face lit up with pure joy when he finally saw both of his daughters. He even stopped to compliment them, because somehow they kept getting prettier as time went on. Sebastian leaned in and demanded the letter details. Now, he pressed, tell me. Hart told me he caught that on the way, then pushed it aside and went straight to check on his daughters. Eckenhart then leaned in and demanded to know about Takumi. Sebastian answered, It was Takumi, he's the one who saved him. Claire, and the moment she heard it, Eckenhardt's mood shot up, he grinned and started slapping her back like full-on. He even praised Takumi for keeping his cool after that brutal slap. Suddenly Leo burst onto the scene, watching Eckenhardt drop to his knees and bow before Takumi, and demanded his daughters explain why they were standing there, frozen in front of a noble. Takumi and Leo were completely baffled. What? Claire demanded Eckenhardt stand up, then immediately watched as they told him to relax. Then they promised to dive into it later until Sherry showed up too, and confusion hit him hard as he blurted that it looked like they still had a lot to talk about. Then we jump ahead. Eckenhardt finally learns the whole truth and he fires off one sharp question. Are you sure, Takumi, that Leo won't strike anyone? Takumi shot back a confident yes, no reason to stress, and Eckenhardt stepped in to greet Leo. Then he snapped, telling everyone to drop the distractions and get back to the talk about marriage. The moment they heard it, those daughters' faces fell, and they couldn't hide their disappointment. Takumi demanded to know why Eckenhardt was pushing so hard for a marriage conversation. Eckenhardt said straight up that Claire was the one who pushed for this, and the moment everyone heard it, shock hit them like a wave. Then he went on, 10 years ago, Claire tried to get answers about their family head, and when she finally learned the truth, she discovered she'd been locked into an arranged wedding. Claire also pushed for an arranged marriage, then totally blanked on the fact she'd even insisted on it. But he was convinced, and he spilled even more of Claire's childish antics. Eckenhardt guessed Claire fell into grief after their mother died, but Talora couldn't remember a single thing. Eckenhardt told me Mrs. Duke was always battling bad health, which is exactly why she struggled through the whole time Claire was being born. They had it all under control, until Talora was born and she passed away right then. Her name was A, and she was overflowing with joy because she had not one but two beautiful daughters. Claire burst into tears and blurted out, "I'm sorry," swearing she'd regret every bit of what she'd put her father through. And he leaned in and asked, "So, should we act like I never brought up marriage?" Claire shot back that she wanted to pick her own partner herself. Talora screamed it right back, like a copy of the same roar. Agreed, and then I told him I thought he should teach them how to deal with men, but turns out they blossomed into fine young ladies, so they probably don't need that lesson. Claire froze in surprise, then blurted out what she wanted to say, only to break into a blazing blush the second she saw Takumi. Takumi's confusion hit him like a wave, while Eckenhardt just grinned like he already knew how it would go. Heat rushed to her face and she blurted, "It's nothing." Then he turns to Sebastian and demands about a room, because he's dying to rest. But Sebastian dropped a bombshell. There's still something huge to talk about. That's Takumi's gift straight from the heart. Eckenhardt leaned in and asked Takumi, "So you've been growing plants as your gift, huh?" Takumi was about to explain his plan just to win the agreement. Then Claire beat him to it, firing off her own explanation and telling him all about that special energy. The second heart jolted, stunned out of his mind. Then he demanded, "You mean that top-grade plant?" She snapped back, "Yes. And he can grow all kinds of amazing plants too." Sebastian told me Takumi didn't just invent plants, he crafted ones they'd never even seen before. They even put it to the test, pushing to see just how well it all worked. Eckenhardt felt the raw power in those plants, and he demanded to know what they were really after. Claire told everyone they were praying for a sales deal with Takumi, and somehow, Takumi felt the exact same way. They could slap it under the ducal family name and rake in the profits. Beck and Hart checked with Takumi, asking if everything was cool, but Takumi wouldn't sign off on a deal the other person didn't want. Nakumi admitted he already saw both the shining and the nasty sides of the deal, yet he wasn't hunting for something all upside, he just wanted his gift to actually help. Eckenhardt burst into laughter and admitted he couldn't believe Takumi had the nerve to say all that while staring them right in the face. So they finally slammed out a deal about the sales. Takumi and Eckenhardt shot each other a grin, then clasped hands and greeted one another with pure excitement. Everyone scattered to their rooms and Takumi beamed because the conversation went perfectly. Then he even started thinking that Eckenhardt was. Leo started licking and teasing Takumi right away. Takumi's eyes shot to Leo, and the dude looked absolutely wrecked and filthy. When Leo heard that, worry hit her hard, because she instantly realized it was bath time and she absolutely hated that idea. Right then Sebastian showed up out of nowhere, and Takumi snapped, "What's going on?" Sebastian slammed the contract into his hands. Seeing it, Takumi got instantly curious. He couldn't figure out how he was even able to read it when it was written in a completely different language. Sebastian spilled the details, every last coin, and exactly how much of the earnings he took for himself. Takumi nodded and promised, "I'll read it," like he couldn't wait to dive in. Until then, Eckenhart still showed up and arrived right there. He dropped to his knees before Takumi, thanking him for rescuing his daughters, only for Takumi to point the credit at Leo like it was Leo who saved them. And in a total accident, he ended up feeding Talora that plant. Still, Eckenhart shot Takumi a grateful nod, because nothing in the world could rewrite the facts. Then he leaned in and asked, "Is Mrs. Leo mad?" Takumi burst into laughter and shot back with a flat no. Sebastian jumped in to help Eckenhart, but Eckenhart only cared about one thing, making sure he didn't feel out of place. Over dinner, Eckenhart leaned in and demanded to know if Takumi could read the agreement. Takumi snapped a yes and then leaned in to tell them he had a few questions he couldn't hold back. Then they sat down, hashed everything out, and somehow came to a clear agreement. Claire told everyone that she and Sebastian locked in the terms of this agreement. Even though their father inspected everything, they still had a real advantage. Thanks to Takumi's gift, they never have to stress about quality or getting enough. Now that it's out there, Eckenhart can't stop wondering what people are saying about Takumi behind his back. Takumi leaned in and said, "I've got one more thing to add. If I'm moving in, I want to stay in your house long enough to live longer." Panic hit him when he realized the whole room stared at him in shock. But then Eckenhart burst into laughter and he told Takumi, "Stay as long as you want." Sebastian asked if they should cram it into the contract, but Eckenhart shut that down hard, telling him that whether the deal happens or not, Takumi stays as long as he wants. Takumi suddenly blurted out, "Are you sure?" They shot back, "Of course," like it was the easiest answer in the world. After that, Takumi slapped his signature on the contract, then rushed to the bathroom to scrub Leo clean. Eckenhart then demanded to see Takumi's gift power, and Takumi got an order form packed with the exact plants he had to grow. Then he spotted a single plant cutting was worth 5 gold, so he decided to grill him about the money later. Then he immediately asks what's behind that tiny list. They promised they'd handle everything with care, so he wouldn't get worn out. Takumi practically sparkled with pride. Then the next scene hit, and he was right there with Eckenhart, ready to prove just how far his skills had exploded. Takumi rushed up to the plant, unleashed his power, and in moments it shot up, swelling until it became fully grown. Seeing it hit Eckenhart like a punch, he couldn't believe his eyes. In just a few minutes, Takumi tore through the order list and wrapped it up. Claire leaned in and demanded to know if Takumi was finally okay. Eckenhart couldn't believe how fast that plant sprang up and took root. He thanked Takumi for it, and deep down, Takumi's heart lifted, because he finally got to do something like this for the people keeping him going. Sebastian rolled in and announced the job was done. Then Takumi was set to grab the plants next, so Eckenhart shocked everyone by asking if Takumi could handle it too, and Takumi snapped back, "Yeah," because it'd help them out even more. As soon as everything was settled, Eckenhart leaned in and demanded to know if Takumi could use a sword. Takumi shot it down fast, because the truth was he didn't know much about weapons at all. Eckenhart then pushed Takumi to master the skills he'd need to protect himself, because Leo wouldn't be around forever. And once he'd tasted success, everyone suddenly wanted to hunt him down. Takumi shot back, "Is that true?" And Eckenhart smirked, "Yeah, because anyone would crave that special gift for themselves, and info can slip out no matter how hard you try to guard it." Takumi frowned in confusion and asked if all of this was just for some plants. Eckenhart told me that in their country people had no choice but to live off plants and medicine, and the one plant he tried to grow is brutally hard to cultivate. And that's why some people are desperate to grow poison, so they'd want him in their grip. Some people even see him as a threat. Takumi understood the stakes and made his move. He marched up to Eckenhart and asked how to wield weapons, and Eckenhart answered by training him in sword fighting. Then Claire chimed in. Her father's got a weird habit. Every time he spots someone talented, he can't stop himself from teaching them. Sebastian praised Eckenhart nonstop for being a terrifyingly skilled sword fighter, right up until the moment the story cut off. Right then, Eckenhart closed in on Takumi and declared, loud and clear, "Swords are the foundation of every weapon." Right before Takumi could even open his mouth, Eckenhart blew out a loud shout. He ordered them to start the lesson immediately. But Claire snapped in fast. She said Takumi just tapped his gift and now training could seriously backfire on him. Eckenhart realized what happened when Takumi collapsed from pushing himself too hard, so they wrote it off for another day, because waiting just made more sense. Back inside, Takumi couldn't stop smiling. he was ready to give it everything and finally learn sword fighting the right way. Then right on cue, Sebastian showed up and handed Takumi a sword. Takumi shot a question, "Is it the same sword I found in the forest?" And Sebastian nodded, "Yeah, it is." Yeah, he even handed Takumi cash right there. Telling him it was the pay for the plants Takumi had grown, he popped open the little bag, coins spilled everywhere. But Takumi had no clue what any of it meant, so he blurted out that Sebastian had to teach him about the coins. Then Sebastian leaned in and told them the lowest coin was made of iron. And 100 iron coins would trade for just 1 copper coin. Those 100 copper coins are worth 1 silver coin, simple as that. Lastly, 10 silver coins will buy you 1 gold coin, so he urged Takumi to stick to silver for most deals, because trading gold means you might hit a wall trying to get the change back. Takumi leaned back and started figuring out exactly how that money stacked up against Japanese yen, and lastly it hit him, he was sitting on 5 million. Rumi leaned in and asked about the house price, and he told her a regular house could be snapped up for just 5 to 10 gold coins. Sebastian leaned in and asked if Takumi wanted more, but Takumi shook his head and said no. Takumi then leaned in and demanded to know exactly how much money they'd blown in Rattos on all that shopping. Sebastian tried to brush it off, but Takumi wouldn't back down. He demanded every last bit of the cost fully paid to him. After that, Sebastian explained dinner to them, then vanished from there, and Takumi couldn't stop worrying. Those plants felt downright terrifying. At the dinner table, Talora's nerves screamed as she asked, trembling, if she could join them too for sword fighting lessons. Eckenhart couldn't take the mystery anymore, he had to know the real reason. Talora screamed that she needs a familiar, so she'll fight tooth and nail to make it happen. Clare made Talora get the message fast, no point trying because Sherry was right there and Leo and Takumi were already with her too. Eckenhart shot down the offer, no way would he let her practice just to chase a familiar. Talora admitted she wasn't even sure why, but her heart was set on it anyway. Eckenhart leaned in and told her, "You're just like Clare," then warned her straight up that sword training isn't some fun little game, it's the real deal. Talora fired back, "If I get hurt, so be it, I'm fine with it," like there was no fear left in her. Eckenhart nodded and agreed, he'd teach her sword fighting too. Joy burst across her face and she launched into a tight hug. Clare slid up to Laura and warned her, "Keep up with her studies while she trains." In the bright morning light, Takumi snapped awake way earlier than anyone expected. But just when he thought he'd be waiting, Talora showed up and snapped that Sherry still hadn't woken up. Leo sat in too, and that's when the conversation ignited. Talora admitted she was freaking out about the training. Takumi admitted he was freaking out too, because this is their very first time. They cracked up laughing, and right on cue Leo finally woke up too. Then the moment the laughter died, the scene flipped to training as Eckenhart started teaching everyone how to hold a sword. They grabbed the swords without trouble, and then he told them to swing, guiding every move with a clear demonstration. He demanded they strike with the blade's razor edge. Talora tried to do exactly that. But she slammed into the ground and her sword snapped into pieces. And it stung her too. Eckenhart snapped at her for messing up the technique. After that, they kept training. Then, just minutes later, they were wheezing and gasping for air, and he said, "It looked like their swords were controlling them, not the other way around, so we told them to start by pounding out real physical strength first." Then it kicked off with basic training, push-ups, squats, sit-ups, and back drills, simple moves, no mercy. Later, they kept pushing until running too started to drain them, and finally they crashed completely, totally wiped out. Takumi then blurted out that he wanted to try crafting something with his plant powers, and asked if it was okay. Eckenhart nodded along, only if it didn't mess with his training. Takumi got his hands dirty and started growing plants from scratch. Laura asked, and he told her it was a special plant, something they could use to help them feel way less tired. Eckenhart froze in shock while Talora tore into it and recoiled, because the taste was absolutely disgusting. In just a few seconds, she felt amazing, like she could do it all over again. Eckenhart nodded and said it was perfect, because now they'd be ready to throw themselves into even harder work. Seeing it, Talora and Takumi froze, pure shock right after. After that, they cranked their basic training up to double, and then slammed them with even more sword swing drills. Few days later, the story jumps. Takumi sprawled on the ground, just lying there. Clare stormed up to him and asked if he was okay, but he could barely answer. Sweat dripped off him like he'd been fighting the whole world. Then she blurted, "Are you sure you really want this?" Because she couldn't stop her father, but she needed to know if he was choosing it with his own heart. She laid out the upside of having guards, telling him he wouldn't have to worry anymore and that everything would finally feel right. Takumi was freaking out about how to break it to her because she couldn't stop worrying about him. Takumi told her he wasn't about to quit sword fighting, even if he could have paid for guards. But then he'd end up annoying a ton of people, and he didn't want Leo stuck being his go-to savior every single time. She said it wasn't bothering a soul, and it wouldn't feel weird at all because Leo is the strongest creature alive. Takumi finally opened up about him and Leo, because it was him who looked after her before everything happened. And he could have told you straight up, they always had each other's backs. So if Leo's the one always shielding him, then what they have isn't real partnership, and she's not his familiar either since he can't just bark orders at her. He never wanted to boss Leo around, but he still needed some way to protect himself. He begged her to keep Eckenhart in the dark, because the second he found out, their training would suddenly crank up in strength. Once she heard about that secret thing between just the two of them, a scorching blush flooded her face. Till then, Talora roared that their break was over and she quickly decided to cheer him up, just for the moment. Clare caught his fire and swore she'd dig into everything she could do to help the ducal family, while he clenched his resolve, gave it his all and sprinted straight to the customer. Then the story jumped ahead a few days. Takumi was suddenly bold enough to ask about the fake fight. Eckenhart didn't dodge, he said they'd clash with swords against him and he'd be swinging back too. Clare blurted, shaking if Eckenhart was really sure about all this. Then he told her not to stress, saying he'd hold his power back and he ordered Takumi to strike first. Takumi clenched his courage in his chest and sprinted straight at Eckenhart to unleash a deadly swing of the sword. But he missed the shot way too easily. Just as Takumi tried to process what was happening, Eckenhart struck, telling him, "If you drop that sword, I'll be right there to tear you apart with an opening attack." And just like that, they vanished for good. Takumi was already set on thanking Eckenhart. But then right out of nowhere, Leo barreled in, growling like a storm, glaring hard at Eckenhart, like he was about to. Rumi couldn't shake the thought that he might have been hurt for real, so when he shouted, she told Leo to wait because Eckenhart wasn't under attack, he was just practicing. Eckenhart checked that everyone was fine, then pointed straight to the Fenrir, before dropping to his knees, bowing hard and begging for forgiveness. Clare showed up and told her the truth. Leo was right there with her. Then in the next breath she realized he was suddenly standing near her father. Eckenhart finally understood why everyone swore the Fenrir was a legend, born to show up the moment the guest of the wind arrives. Takumi grinned because he knew Leo was trying to help her, so he thanked him right away. Meanwhile, Talora still got crushed in the practice fight and Eckenhart shut the day down. Eckenhart then admitted he's swamped now, said today would be his final day, and handed them a training plan, making them promise they'll stick to it. Eckenhart geared up to head back and grilled Sebastian to hand him the plants Takumi had grown, since he was taking them home with him. He even demanded they sell the plants in Rattos first, and Sebastian immediately nodded and agreed. Since Rattos is basically a travel hub, getting the word out about it is a total breeze. So they used the family shop like normal, and the whole family was just sitting there talking like it was any other day. Takumi stayed silent, his mind racing. Since he barely knew this new place, he figured it was safer not to jump into the conversation. Out of nowhere, he suddenly had an idea and blurted to Clare, asking if he could grab the sausages to save for later. Clare demanded the reason and he told her he'd train Leo to master patience, starting with what happened the day before. Eckenhart even felt humiliated for freezing when it mattered, and Takumi's nerves were on full blast because he knew if Leo snapped and went wild, it would turn into a total disaster. Clare pushed to let Sherry join them, but Eckenhart wanted to drill her with strict discipline training. They all headed straight for the backyard and he told both Fenrirs, "We're gonna bring sausages, just don't pounce on them the second we walk in." Eckenhart hauled out the firepower to fry the sausages, but before the sizzle even started, Leo clocked it and bolted over to devour them. In a blink, she scarfed down those sausages. No one even saw her do it, and the whole room froze when they realized the sausages were already gone. Takumi snapped at Leo. She never waited and even blew past Sherry. Leo started making adorable little sounds, but Takumi didn't budge an inch. She looked Leo dead in the eyes and swore she wouldn't let those mouth-watering smells lure her again. Training kicked off again, and this time the Fenrirs were scrambling to hide it desperately. But when Leo noticed something was off, Clare broke into a smile right when it looked like they were seconds away from total failure, and then... But it still counted, so she shouted for the Fenrirs and had them come feast. Eckenhart demanded, "Is it done yet?" but Takumi grabbed the next test, and this time he plopped the sausage right on their noses. They whipped it into the air, then chomped down on the sausage like it was the whole world. Everyone stared in shock, but Takumi snapped and started yelling at Leo, threatening that if they botch it next time, they're not getting dinner. The second time around, the Fenrir's pulled it off somehow. So Takumi challenged them to try it one more time, and they gobbled it up in pure playful chaos. Takumi then leaned in and asked if Eckenhart wanted to try riding Leo. Eckenhart froze in shock, but he still nodded and agreed, and right then Takumi called Leo over. As soon as things kicked off, Eckenhart shot the question again, asking if it was fine so he could grab a ride for a few more minutes. After that, Eckenhart finally threw himself back into action, then asked Takumi to check the residence before they headed out. And Eckenhart even said he can't wait to watch their sword-swinging skills in action. Next day, Talora burst out shouting with pure joy, telling him, "I'm done with my studies," and then she insisted that from tomorrow onward she wouldn't have to study for a while. Takumi got the details straight from Clare, and Clare didn't beat around the bush, she just said, yes. She admitted she wished Talora had poured this much attention into her studies from the very beginning. Talora then said they could finally kick off the new plan her father designed, and she wouldn't let studying ruin it. Takumi immediately praised Talora for standing firm. Clare nodded too, and Takumi turned to ask, "So Leo, ready?" Leo snapped back with a happy bark, practically bursting with excitement. At last they were set to kick off the fresh training plan Eckenhart cooked up. They were supposed to rush Leo and stab at him with their swords, but every one of them shook with nerves, because going straight at Leo was no walk in the park. But here's the crazy part, no matter how hard they slashed Leo with their swords, it never even made her flinch. Their whole mission is to land a hit on Leo, no matter how fast and skilled she is, so they can finally find out if they're truly good sword fighters. So the moment it started, Takumi and Talora both sprinted straight at Leo, ready to crush him. But Leo slipped out of the way like it was nothing. He just jumped and laughed off every attack. And just like that, they kept throwing themselves at it, again and again, until they couldn't stop. After a while, they burned out and cracked under the pressure. Leo's speed was unreal, something they couldn't even keep up with. Takumi watched it and swore it looked like Leo was just playing, but if it was a game, then they still had a mountain to climb. Takumi decided he'd make it happen somehow, and he wasn't waiting. And then they praised Leo to the skies for being so damn good. Sebastian told them straight up, Takumi and Talora were carving through their swords like pros, they just had to line up their swings with Leo's timing. Takumi nodded, but now his mind raced. How on earth could he keep up with Leo's blistering speed and still track him with their eyes? Clare cut in mid-conversation and fired off the question, "What if we swing our swords just a little earlier?" Talora looked totally lost, but Takumi snapped, "Trust me, this might be exactly what we need to make it work." But even so, they pushed even harder and went back to training, more practice, no excuses. They came to Leo begging for her help, and that's when Takumi threw everything he had into the job. Inside the mansion, Clare leaned in and asked Takumi if he'd take a quick break. He shot back an "okay," and she told him they were about to start selling, so he better come by and check it out. He agreed without hesitation. Then Talora suddenly blurted out that she wanted in too. Clare peppered Talora with questions about her studies, and Talora snapped back that she wanted to handle everything early and that she wanted to go with Leo too. Clare practically yelled, "We're not playing around," but Talora shot back, "I just don't want to sit at home all the time." Takumi stared at the evidence and realized it was the truth. So he turned to Clare and demanded she bring Talora along with them, and since this time it wouldn't be dangerous, Clare finally had no choice but to agree. Sebastian told Takumi to plant a few extra crops. Takumi nodded and went along, and Clare immediately warned him not to get too carried away. This time he didn't crumple and black out like last time, training held him together. 2 days later, everyone finally got ready to leave, then Talora slid in late and Takumi shot her a sharp question, "Why?" She flashed her sword at him and Takumi knew they wouldn't get hurt, but that didn't mean it was wrong to bring a blade with them. At last, they broke off and headed for the shop. On the way there, he practically begged Leo, "Don't go getting so hyped, save it for later." They told him it had to be fun for Leo, because after all that training, she hadn't been able to run wild like this before. Takumi even tossed kindness toward the kids while they played, and Clare just couldn't stop staring at Takumi's bright, happy smile. And she blurted out that she was talking about him. He turned red when she said it because he completely misread her intentions, and she just kept grinning at him like she knew exactly what she was doing. On which he leaned in and asked, "So it's really that funny, even?" Sebastian burst into laughter outside the carriage as it rolled down the road. Finally, they busted through the last stretch and slammed into their destination. Inside the town, they hurried with Takumi straight to the shop and pointed it out. This was where they were going to sell the plants. Takumi spots the shop downstairs, right on the first floor. Then Takumi ordered Nicola to watch over Leo and Sherry, pushed inside and saw a whole new face, Callie's, who introduced himself and immediately laid out his job, keeping an eye on the shop. Takumi leaned in, eyes curious, and demanded how Callie's even knew about him. Callie's answered that Sebastian had told him, and even promised Takumi he'd never spill a word about him to anyone. They slipped into the back room and Sebastian wasted no time. He proudly showed the plants to Callie's. Paulus prays for these plants to be this good again because they never usually show up like this. Callus snapped at the other workers and demanded they look after the plants. Takumi asked if they were planning to do something with them and Callus said they'd be sorted into little boxes, one for each thing they were selling. Alice hauled a table outside the shop, then told everyone they'd better watch, because it was their first day selling those plants and she couldn't wait to show them off. Suddenly, Takumi heard Callie's scream in pure terror, then he bolted outside and saw Callie's shaking, terrified of Leo. Sebastian slammed it into Callie's head. He'd already told him about Leo. Clare even told him not to worry about Leo, she wouldn't hurt a soul. Then Takumi had Callie's pet her and the moment he did, the tension in him melted away. At last, everything was set, displays up, tiny packets ready, and all that was left was to wait for customers to walk in. Inside, Takumi and Clare were praying the sales would finally kick off. Suddenly, a wild noise burst from outside. When they peeked out, Takumi froze in shock because the crowd gathering there was massive. Sebastian leaned in and said it looked like Callie's nailed it, because rounding up kids to pet Leo doesn't just win hearts, it pulls their parents right along too, and yeah, the whole plan was genius. Takumi stepped outside and asked Callie's if everything was okay, then Callie's admitted, "Leo's even more famous than we ever thought." Takumi clocked the confusion on Leo's face, because it was her first time ever dealing with this. Hearing that, Callie's snapped into nerves and Takumi hurried over to Leo, praising her for staying cool under pressure. Then he told Leo to unleash one brutal howl, and the second that sound hit, every kid froze in place for a few stunned moments. Takumi told them if you want to pet her you've gotta get in line, and Callus stepped up ready to run the kids' queue. Takumi even told the parents to go grab some plants if they wanted, then they got slammed with everything and hours vanished like it was nothing. At that moment, from behind, a kid yanked at Takumi's sleeve, so Takumi snapped around and demanded why. The kid just grinned and told him to come with him. Before he left, Takumi grabbed Leo's attention and told him to stay sharp, be careful, keep his cool and don't let the chaos hit, because the kids were already yanking him off in some direction. After a few tense minutes, he handed Takumi off to a man who quickly tossed the kids some steaks for completing the job. That man was one of the people Takumi crossed paths with back then, long before this all started. Takumi assumed that guy was arrested. Turns out Mac, the one everyone pegged, walked free because he'd been on his best behavior. Takumi demanded why Mac was making that kid drag him along, and Mac snapped back that it was finally time to get payback on Takumi for the humiliation. Takumi didn't get how he'd embarrassed him, but Mac didn't even hear. He just roared that he'd do it because Takumi's pet wouldn't feel a thing from all the way over here. Takumi slipped a hand onto his sword, and the second Mac lunged in with that small blade, he was ready. He yanked his sword free to take the hit, and Mac went wide-eyed, completely stunned. They slammed their swords together again and Takumi clocked Mac's weak spot so he struck hard and won. Now Mac is down on one knee staring up at Takumi who's poised to stab him the second he twitches. While Takumi was lost in his thoughts, Mac lunged back toward his sword to grab it. Then bam, Leo burst out of nowhere and slammed into him. Sebastian and the rest all rushed over, firing off worried questions like, "Takumi, are you okay?" Takumi flashed a grin and relied on his sword-fighting skill to win them over. Sebastian spotted Mac again and a flash of memory hit him, like he finally remembered who Mac really was. Takumi spilled the whole past and Mac's daring trick, how he snatched Takumi out, left everyone stunned. Sebastian strode right up to Mac and demanded if he knew he and Mac were tied to the ducal family, then Mac's face snapped with shock as he blurted a hard no. Sebastian tells us the news, Mac is finally okay because now he can get sentenced to death. He was freaking out about running, but Sebastian stopped him cold and told him not to. because it's a silver Fenrir. Mac begged them to help him because he'd acted on pure impulse, and Sebastian sat there like, okay, what happens next? But Takumi cut in and demanded Sebastian forgive Mac, so at Takumi's plea, Sebastian finally relented and let Mac walk free. Before long, the daily city guards showed up too, so Sebastian sprinted over and took them on. After a few tense moments, Sebastian stormed back and told Clare and Takumi that Mac wasn't the least bit dangerous. He'd never committed any serious crimes before. He keeps throwing threats and boom, arrested. But now the ducal family's involved, so they can kick Mac out of the town or even the country. That's when Takumi marched up to Mac and demanded to know what he did wrong. Mac begged for forgiveness for all his wrongdoings, and then Takumi suddenly got it. If Mac really wants to, he can act right. So he turns to Clare and Sebastian and asks them if he can make the call on this. They both agreed because Takumi was the only one who could take Mac down. Takumi thanked them, then immediately thought if he handed Mac over to the guards, Mac would just stir up trouble all over again. So we had to lock in on what came next. Takumi shot Cal's a question: did he have enough people working at the shop? Cal's shot back that maybe he just needs more help. Then Takumi urged him to hire Mac, but Cal's couldn't decide if that was the move or a mistake. So Takumi decided to hire Mac himself to handle the plant sales, because Mac could haul the plants for him, and since he was free, he could work at the shop too. Cal grilled Takumi, asking if Mac really would pull it off, and Takumi tried to scramble up a plan, until Sebastian cut in, declaring it was the perfect job for Leo. As soon as Leo catches that scent, she can track the person to anywhere they go. She begged to step off the tracking and handle Mac herself. Then the second Mac found out, nerves hit hard as he gulped, asking if Takumi would truly hand him a real job. Takumi shot back, yeah, warning that if Mac tried to run, Leo would be right there, so Mac panicked and swore he wouldn't run. Callus pressed again, demanding to know if Takumi was truly sure about hiring a criminal. Takumi said he wants to guide Mac onto the right path, and Sebastian admitted it totally throws him back to the past. But he still wouldn't spill what the past was. Then Takumi untied Mac, and the second Mac was free, he started calling Takumi boss. They shook hands and traded names, and right after that, Takumi told Mac to make sure he actually got the work done. Mac nodded and agreed without hesitation. Right after they tore back to the shop, Callie blurted out that they'd finally sold every last plant. Takumi jolts in shock and blurts, wait, does this town not have enough plants for everyone? Analysts spilled the truth. A cheating plant doctor set up shop, peddling trash plants while promising full power, then delivering nothing. Hearing that, Sebastian's eyes lit up. Someone had the nerve to pull a move like that right in the ducal family's area. When Takumi saw him, surprise hit hard, but Clare quickly told him the truth. Sebastian lives for dragging down anyone who dares break the rules. Mac stormed in and told me everything about that dude selling fake medicine. Mac said the guy came from another town, ran with an aristocrat, and that before all this, he'd already caused a big mess in that shop. Mac got jumped by a crew, and they told him straight up that the aristocrat had greenlit their sales, then warned him that if he ever caused trouble again, he'd be messing with a noble. Takumi clocked what was happening and couldn't help but wonder, did some aristocrat truly sign off on this? Still, Takumi shot Mac a grateful nod and thanked him for the info. Right then, Clare showed up and Takumi spilled the whole story, so Sebastian and Clare wasted no time running straight to Eckenhart to tell him everything. Sebastian and Clare decided to tell this to Eckenhart. Told Nicola to chase down every detail he could, then come back and report it all to Mr. Duke. As Nicola set off, Takumi shoved 2 plants into his hands to help his muscles recover and crush the tiredness. Even Nicola got pulled into it. Callas insisted he shouldn't eat both at once. Then Callas turned to Takumi and asked if they could finally talk about what to do with the plants from here on out. Callas said they needed more quantity and pushing for extra capwort would help, only Takumi looked totally lost at the word capwort. Callas explained that a sickness was spreading around and that capwort would be perfect for getting people back on their feet. Takumi demanded the truth, was this illness spreading everywhere? Kala nodded and said once capwort was sold out, the sickness would stop and the Duke's name would rise again. Sebastian snatched the order task, and then Clare pulled Takumi along with her to an orphanage. On the way there, Clare blurted that she couldn't shake her fear for the orphanage after learning the illness was going around. Takumi just got the shock. Turns out running an orphanage isn't for regular people, it's the nobles who take charge in the big cities. The ducal family controls the place, then snatches up those kids as helpers once they grow up. And yep, Layla, Gelda, Nicola, and Philip all came straight from the orphanage. When they finally arrived, Takumi stared in shock. This orphanage looked exactly like a church. Leo started acting weird, so Takumi pounced and demanded answers. Then Leo admitted it felt like something was off from the inside. Claire zeroed in on the cleaner and demanded to know where the headlady was, and just like that, Martellana, the headlady, stepped out and greeted them. But she warned them it wasn't a good time to come to the orphanage, and Claire shot back, asking what happened. Martellana swore they'd snagged medicine from a shop with great prices, but once they tried it, it just didn't work. Claire shot a question to see if it came from some shop bragging it had real connections to the rich. Marcellana shot back a yes, then the truth hit her like a jolt, and she started to panic, asking if they were the nobles the shop had been talking about. Claire snapped back with a firm no, then vowed to handle it fast, because if this dragged on, it would stain the ducal family's name. Martellana begged for forgiveness over the blunder, but Claire wouldn't hear it. She knew this wasn't her fault. Sebastian chose to tackle the orphanage first, and Claire immediately pushed Takumi to step in and help get the plants taken care of. Martellana questioned Takumi, and the moment she spotted the Fenrir, tension snapped tight in her body. Claire stepped in, introduced Takumi, and told her to stop stressing about Leo. Takumi finally realizes Claire is hiding his special ability, and both of them greet each other like nothing's wrong. Then they barged into the orphanage, and the state of those kids hit them like a punch. When Sebastian checked, he confirmed it was exactly the same as Talora's condition. Takumi knows this isn't just any cold, it's the kind that hits hard, so they sat down and hashed it out together. Then Takumi leaned in and asked, "Does Sebastian need Capworth?" And Sebastian answered, "Yeah, I do." Takumi grinned and told him, "Don't worry about a thing." They marched into the orphanage yard, and Takumi unleashed his plant-growing technique right there. Some kids bounced back, others didn't, and even now a few are still stuck lying down. Everyone turned to Takumi, thanking him like he'd just saved the day. He told them to take the same medicine even if they never caught the illness. Martellana shot him a confused look and asked why, and Takumi told her she might have picked up some sickness germs. Sebastian grinned because they finally cracked the illness, and Claire immediately turned to Martellana, asking about the capwort being sold. Martellana revealed that someone in their town had bought every last bit of the supply. 2 weeks ago, they finally cracked the truth. Someone was dumping it at bargain prices, and Claire instantly clocked it as shady. So Sebastian and she locked eyes and decided to dig in because those strange connections were everywhere, screaming for answers. She said the medicine arrived 2 weeks back, and right on its heels the illness crashed in. Takumi pressed the question like, "Are you telling me the shop planned every single bit of this?" Claire and Sebastian are convinced they got the plants, then mixed them with something they shouldn't have. Sebastian suddenly demanded to step out for a while, and Takumi snapped, "What's wrong?" Claire nodded and said Sebastian helps Nicola with the search, then turned to Martellana and asked if they could hide at the church until Sebastian came back. Takumi shoved Leo toward the crowd and told him to go make friends and play with everyone. Talora marched up to every kid and told them to go play with Leo together. Everyone's laughing and playing with Leo, then, out of nowhere, a kid edges up near Takumi. Her name was Militia. She flashed Takumi a grateful smile and thanked him because now she was totally fine. She even swallowed her pride and apologized to the mistress, but she refused to let it end there because she still wanted to thank him herself. Martellana leaned in and told Takumi, "Militia's the oldest kid at this orphanage. She usually leaves for work, but today she's here and she's helping out." Militia shot back that tending to the orphanage was good work too, and she genuinely loved helping people. Claire then revealed that Militia turned down their job offer for that exact same reason. Militia was grateful for how she was raised, so she threw her whole heart into helping other people. Takumi leaned in and demanded to know what Militia meant by helping people. Takumi wasn't having it. He jumped in with selling vegetables as an example, said it helps people too, and then pressed, "So what does your militia do that actually makes a difference?" She told him she was ecstatic when he healed everyone, but she can't pull that off because she has no orphanage and no medical knowledge. He told her this can be fixed, just study, and pushed her to decide what she's going to do next. She blurted it out, "Doctor," and demanded to know if Takumi would finally teach her. Takumi got himself in deep trouble because he had no clue how to be a real doctor. He was just pretending, and it finally caught up to him. Still, he pressed for the why, and she confessed it. he came up with the fix so fast that every kid is playing happily right now. He told her he finally understood what she wanted, and the moment she heard it, her face lit up. Then she grabbed his arm and asked, "So, are you ready to teach me?" He cornered Clare right away, asking if the militia could stay at their mansion, and Clare didn't bat an eye. But she made sure militia couldn't stay in the same room with him. Martin Talana wouldn't have it either. Then he grabbed Takumi's attention and asked, "So, you're really okay with this?" Then they marched her to the backyard and demanded she keep the secret, because even the ducal family was hiding it just as tightly. Then Takumi used his gift power to grow Capwort like it was nothing. Before anyone could figure out who the militia stunned, Takumi spilled his power right up until Sebastian showed up and promised he'd pass the rest of the intel to militia. Then, the second Sebastian showed up, Clare lit up with pure joy. After a few tense minutes, militia finally cracked the whole truth. Yumi asked if she was confused, and she shook her head fast, saying it feels unbelievably amazing that a skill this great even exists. Then she pointed at Takumi and declared he was a special person, like a teacher with a heart. She promised she'd obey every word he said, bust her butt to master medicine, and Takumi couldn't help but feel it all click. He won't just let the teacher's words slide, he feels like he never deserved it. But she grabs his doubts and shuts them down, saying it doesn't matter because she's always seen him as the teacher of her own life. Takumi feels on edge. First he hears the boss's voice and now the teacher's too. Something about all of this feels way too weird for him. When Clare saw him, her smile snapped into place and she couldn't even finish the sentence, she was that excited. Finally, Takumi can't wait to dive deeper into the militia and learn everything he can.